Chapter 342. Not to mention it was done in such a crude way by a female. This subordinate will definitely investigate seriously, Dong Hao said. Fortunately, before the incident, Shen Yuan had already passed the thing to your highness. Fu Xiuyi said. Unfortunately, one still have to wait. At the other end, in the upper floor of the Feng Xian pawn shop, Ji Yushu clapped his hands together and was grinning from ear to ear. Wonderful. Shen young lady really does not take action, but once she takes action, it is amazing. Originally tomorrow it should be Shen Xian who is out of luck, but at the end Shen Yuan is in prison today. This day really came at the right time. It is only a coincidence. Gao Yang rolled his eyes at him. Most likely Shen Miao still does not know about the matter. No matter if she knows or not, I have won the bet with you. Ji Yushu was proud of himself. Send the banknotes to the pawn shop yourself and hand it over to Hong Ling. Gao Yang was silent for a moment before saying, perhaps Shen Yuan had never thought that there would be a day where he would fall into such despicable means. Because his own wife was having an affair and was jealous of others, he mistakenly killed the adulterer. No matter how one listened to these words, it was not very glorious. No matter if it was the adulterer or the woman who did not follow the womanly ways or the husband's family who was cuckolded, when people talk about this matter, they would only treat it as a joke. Shen Yuan originally had talent and knew how to endure, and had just returned to the capital. With Fu Xiuyi's attention on him, he would become a talent that no one could underestimate in time. Who knew that it would end in such an embarrassing and tragic manner? Even though it looked like a joke, the outcome was very grim. Just because the person he killed was Sun Tianzheng's only son. Sun Tianzheng will send up the memorial tomorrow. Gao Yang, do you think that Shen Yuan will pay with his life this time? Ji Yushu asked. What do you think of Shen Miao? Gao Yang asked an irrelevant question. What does this have to do with Shen young lady? Ji Yushu was puzzled. Shen Miao is a person who set traps. Once one stepped into it, have you seen anyone who could retreat safely? From Prince Yu's incident, you should be able to see that her traps were never just one move. This matter looked like to deal with Shen Yuan, but in fact it was not so. You say that she still has a moves? Ji Yushu asked. At most Shen Yuan will pay with his life. What else does she want? I feel that Shen Yuan is only one of them. Gao Yang shook his head. His expression couldn't help but turn grim. If she did it, I have a feeling that it wouldn't be just one person. Ji Yushu was silent for a moment before asking seriously, what kind of deep enmity does Shen young lady have with the rest of the Shen family? Even though it is creepy, one think that there is a reason for it. Could it be that the Shen family had done something unforgivable to her? For a little girl to use such cruel means to plan step by step, there must be some other hidden story. It was just that even Bai Shaosheng could not find out that it was because of the Shen family's method of raising her to be an idiot. It seemed to be somewhat unreasonable. Gao Yang shook his head. I don't know either, but she's too flamboyant. This time Shen Yuan was sent to prison, because Shen Yuan was Prince Ding's man. Since Prince Ding was at a disadvantage, he would definitely notice her. The person that was previously sent also said that Prince Ding's men are currently investigating the matter. It is not good for Shen young lady to go against Prince Ding. Ji Yushu was deeply worried. Prince Ding's thoughts are deep and his methods are treacherous. Once it is discovered that it was done by Shen young lady, one do not know what he would do in the future. No need to worry. Gao Yang said, I feel that Shen Miao is very familiar with Prince Ding. Perhaps everything that she did, she might have considered the consequences if Prince Ding knew about it. Rather than worry about her, it is better to worry about yourself. Gao Yang looked at Ji Yushu. Have you found the person that third Xia wanted you to look for?
Ko.
Ji Yushu touched his nose. I will immediately send someone over. Did not think that the Shen family's internal affairs were so chaotic. To have such a big play at the beginning of spring this year, what would happen in the future? Ayaya. Both are nobles, but fell in love with a commoner young female. Because of jealousy, one died, and one was injured. Isn't this a play that only appears in dramas? If one were to say that commoner young female looks are really ordinary, one do not know why would the two nobles be so blind to be jealous of her. It would be better to let the two nobles be together. Huolong, did you recently read some strange books again? The black-clad female brushed her long hair and said in a charming manner, "Could it be that what I said is wrong? For men to fight over, one must at least be as beautiful as me." You're in high spirits. A sudden voice sounded, and the group of black-clad men that were squatting on the ground and playing suddenly became silent. One by one, they stood up as if they were facing a great enemy and looked at the person in front of them. The purple-clad youth had handsome brows but looked colder and more arrogant in the night. He swept a glance at everyone. Why did he not continue speaking? Everyone lowered their heads and did not speak. Xie Jingxing turned and left, and only stopped after he left that group of people far behind did he laugh at himself. This little girl has some means. He lowered his eyes and looked at the starless night sky before saying softly, "I do not have time anymore." Chapter 343. Regarding the case of Shen Yuan accidentally killing Sun Kai-nan in the Ding capital, the trial of the case was unprecedentedly swift and decisive. First of all, Sun Tianzheng sent a memorial to the imperial court to request Shen Yuan to repay the debt of blood with blood. If he did not comply, he would have to return to his hometown due to his old age, so he actually threatened Emperor Wen Hui to quit. Compared to Xin Gui, the Minister of Appointments was clearly more important. Sun Tianzheng had been in office for many years, and the connections he had made were to suddenly change to someone else. It was likely that there would be great chaos. Emperor Wen Hui naturally wanted to appease Sun Tianzheng. Secondly, the imperial censors would never point fingers at the courtiers for making mistakes. How could they let this case of manslaughter go? Thinking that Sun Tianzheng had lost his only son, the censors' censure fell on Xin Gui. What was unexpected was Xin Gui's attitude. Xin Gui knelt in front of Emperor Wen Hui and promised with tears and snot that he did not teach his son properly and was willing to place righteousness before family and let Shen Yuan pay with his life. It was said that his words shocked all the civil and military officials in the court. Although these words sounded impartial, he did not try to fight for his own son first, but instead straightforwardly agreed to pay with his life. This was too inhumane. Even though Xin Gui was usually smooth and slick, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. This action still made his colleagues who were on good terms with him stay at a respectful distance. The ministers all stood on Sun Tianzheng's side, and when Emperor Wen Hui asked the princes for their opinion, the 9 princes unanimously stood on Sun Tianzheng's side. Even if they didn't express their stance, almost everyone knew how the case would go. Shen Yuan's execution order was given 3 days later. This was probably the fastest execution order since the founding of Ming-Chi. There was almost no action to reverse the verdict or resist, and directly convicted. There was no doubt that the Sun family added fuel to the fire, but the Shen family's inaction was also a big reason. As for whether there were other people secretly pulling the strings, it was unknown. In the dark prison, Shen Yuan sat in the innermost part. His hair was already disheveled, and his body had not been washed for several days, so there was a sour smell coming from it. If one were to look closely at his usually calm gaze, one would be able to see slight panic and even a hint of despair hidden within. Last night, someone had snuck in and fed him a mute drug. He could not say anything.
Who would do such a thing?
Who would have such remarkable abilities to break into the prison? Shen Yuan knew it clearly. Fu Xiaoyi would not come to save him. At first, he still held a bit of hope, but after thinking about it carefully, he knew that Fu Xiaoyi saving him would do more harm than good. That man was best at seeking benefits and avoiding harm, so he would not take this risk for him. On the contrary, Shen Yuan's existence had become a restless chess piece for Fu Xiaoyi. Naturally, Fu Xiaoyi had to eradicate him mercilessly. Feeding him a mute drug did not necessarily mean that he did not want to kill him, but Fu Xiaoyi was cautious and most likely he was afraid that if he died in the prison it would raise suspicions. A bitter smile slowly floated on Shen Yuan's lips. The winner was king, and the loser was in the wrong. He knew from the beginning what kind of person Fu Xiaoyi was. Working under Fu Xiaoyi, one should have thought that there might be such a result, but one did not expect that this result would come so quickly. There seemed to be footsteps in the darkness. Unlike the slightly hurried footsteps of the prison guards, the footsteps were somewhat slow. He raised his head and looked towards the direction of the footsteps and saw that under the dim light, a purple dress was right in front of him. Looking up, the young female had a delicate and pretty face as she looked at him with a smile. Second older brother. Xin Yuan's heart was blocked up. The moment he saw Xin Miao's face, a strong hatred and unwillingness gushed out from his heart, making Xin Yuan wish that he could kill Xin Miao now. Even if he did not understand how the matter became like this, there was one thing that Xin Yuan was very clear about. This matter was definitely related to Xin Miao. Chapter 344. Xin Miao slowly squatted down and was at eye level with Xin Yuan as she smiled. Second older brother must not be living well in there these days. Second Shun is crazy, and second Shu is not willing to see you. Seventh younger brother is still young. Speaking of which, Old Foreign dotes on you the most, but yesterday Old Foreign gave an order that no one is allowed to mention your name in the residence. It seemed that she had given up on you. After thinking about it in my heart, you and I are siblings, so I came to send you on your last journey. Xin Yuan gritted his teeth as he looked at Xin Miao. Words could kill and destroy a person's faith. And what Xin Miao did now was to stab a knife into his heart without hesitation. Even though Xin Yuan's feelings were cold, but when he was in prison and there was no one who came to visit, it made one's heart feel cold. Even though Old Foreign treated him well in the past, it was because of his innate talent and intelligence. Now that he was a prisoner, Old Xin Foreign would definitely draw a clear line to avoid trouble. Thinking about it this way, second older brother and eldest sister are indeed biological siblings, and both had been in prison before. But when eldest sister was in prison, second Shun was still running around, but now there is no one running around for you.
Xin Yuan did not speak.
Why is second older brother not speaking? Xin Miao tilted her head and looked at him. Is it that you are not willing to talk to me, or... She suddenly smiled. Fed mute medicine? Xin Yuan was surprised for a moment, as Xin Miao could actually guess that he was fed mute medicine. Before he could think it through, Xin Miao's following words made him shocked. It seems that Fu Xiuyi's methods are still the same as before, and there is no difference. Xin Miao muttered. Xin Yuan's eyes widened as he heard Fu Xiuyi's name from Xin Miao's mouth. How did Xin Miao know that he was working for Fu Xiuyi? Moreover, Xin Miao used such a familiar tone, and from her words, it seemed that she understood Fu Xiuyi very well. The amazement in Xin Yuan's heart could not be expressed in words. In the inner courtyard of the Shun residence, no matter how brilliant Xin Miao's methods were, Xin Yuan did not think too highly of her because the unmarried young ladies scene stopped there. But when Xin Miao brought out Fu Xiuyi's name, Xin Yuan could no longer look at it with a normal heart. Second older brother need not be so surprised. Xin Miao swept a glance at him and said, Not only do I know Fu Xiuyi, I also know his plans. If you want to tell Fu Xiuyi about my matter and atone for your crimes, it is too late. His Highness Prince Ding was cautious by nature, and since he had fed you mute medicine, he would not save you. In order to not attract attention, he would not send anyone over here. Even after you die, I won't have any contact with you. From the moment you became a cripple, he had nothing to do with you, and he won't let you have any means to get involved with him. Xin Yuan's heart started to beat wildly. What Xin Miao said was not wrong. Fu Xiuyi was that kind of person. Therefore, after yesterday, he had been waiting for his own death in despair. One must not think of a life and death struggle because that kind of ending would be worse than death. Fu Xiuyi was never the gentleman that he was on the surface. He dipped his finger into the muddy water in the bowl and wrote a few words on the dusty ground. What is your purpose? Xin Miao burst out laughing. When she laughed, her eyes were curved and the corners of her mouth curved. It was as if she had returned to a year ago when she was still an idiot. She was a little stupid and a little scheming, but she was indeed a young lady who did not understand anything. Now it was obviously the same demeanor, but it made one's heart feel cold. Xin Miao finally stopped laughing and looked at Xin Yuan. Didn't second older brother guess what my purpose is? You want to deal with the second household? Xin Yuan wrote on the ground. Not only the second household. Xin Miao suddenly whispered. Her eyes suddenly burst out a bit of fierceness. She was unable to restrain the fierceness, and even killing intent overflowed. She said, "There is still the third household, Old Foreign and Prince Ding." Chapter 345. Xin Yuan stared at her closely. "You want to ask again why?" Shun Miao said, "I am only doing the things that you have done before for you to see. Just like this time, does second older brother not feel familiar with the matter of the Jing family? That's because that's your method to begin with. How can you resolve it when I'm using your own method to deal with you?" Shun Yuan looked at Xin Miao in confusion. He did not understand Xin Miao's words and only felt that Xin Miao's expression at the moment was like she had fallen into madness. Forget about the hatred towards the second and third household, since everyone knew that they were only pretending to be harmonious on the surface. But where did the hatred towards Prince Ding come from? Was it because she was in love with Prince Ding but was unable to get a response? Second older brother. Xin Miao smiled strangely. "You should thank this younger sister. On your road to the Yellow Springs, there are so many people who will accompany you in death. Do not worry, after you, there will not be anyone else in the second household of the Xin family to take over your position. You will definitely still be the only eldest son of the Xin family." Xin Yuan glared at Xin Miao. Xin Miao stood up and her voice was gently raised in the darkness before falling heavily into Xin Yuan's ears. "The second household will be without descendants." When they were out, the jailer naturally left in satisfaction after obtaining the benefits and even promised not to tell outsiders about the matter. Jingjia and Guyu helped Xin Miao up the horse carriage and Guyu asked, "Young lady, is it really necessary to execute second young master 3 days later?" Xin Miao nodded her head. "It is really like a dream." Guyu muttered, "A few days ago second young master was still high and mighty, but now his life is about to be delivered. Fate should be like this." Shun Miao said coldly. Sensing that Xin Miao's current mood was most likely not very good, Jingjia and Guyu stuck out their tongues and no longer spoke. Upon returning to the Xin residence, upon entering the room, one saw a number of people surrounding the main hall. Upon a closer look, it was the Jing family. Jing Furen was rolling on the floor making a scene. "You all return my choo-choo. You all return my choo-choo." Old Shinfuren was so angry that her face turned green and called out to the servants at the side, "Still not throwing these people out for me." Old Foreign, Jing Guansheng changed his previous refined appearance and said fiercely, "Our Chu-Chu entered your residence perfectly, but was taken away by others. Now it is unknown whether she is dead or alive. Even if this matter is brought to the officials, you are in the wrong." Old Shinfuren scolded angrily, "You still have the face to say, 'What did that little bitch do to our family?' If it wasn't for this jinx, how would the Xin family be involved in the lawsuit?" Old Fern must speak cautiously. Jing Guanxing said, "At that time we all said that there must be someone secretly playing tricks. My sister's personal maidservant also disappeared. Don't you think it's strange? Someone must have bribed her." The womenfolk in the hall were all present. Chun Rochio looked at the front with some headaches, Xinyu looked at the Jing family with disgust, and Luo Shui Yan had an indifferent attitude. Wan Yinyang held Xin Dongling's hand and stood quietly at the side, as there was no place for her to interrupt. Biao older brother is pulling the topic too far. Do you think that by placing all the sins on a personal maidservant, everything would be over? Shun Miao's voice sounded. After all, this is a matter of having an illicit relationship with others, and one cannot be forced by a maidservant. The words of ridicule made Jing Guansheng's face turn red and white. Everyone looked towards the door as Xin Miao walked in. Old Shinforen had never liked Xin Miao as much as today. As long as she could make these unreasonable pestering people of the Jing family stop for a moment, her heart would be warm. Luo Shui Yan happily pulled Xin Miao to her side. "Jiao Jiao has been out for so long. Are you tired?" Chapter 346. Jing Foren was still crying. "You and father are blood relatives, and Chu Chu also has your blood flowing in her. How can you be so cruel? Heavens! Old Foren, you are forcing us to death." Old Shin Foren was extremely annoyed. "Who is blood relative to you? A group of broken families from the capital also want to have a relationship with me? Why not take a piss and see who you are? Really think that with some good looks, one can do whatever one wants. Indeed worthy to be from a small family. A body full of coquettishness and know how to seduce men at such a young age. Old Shinforen was anxious and actually used the scolding words that she used in the marketplace. It could be said to be extremely unpleasant to hear, and for a moment, everyone who heard it was stunned. After a long while, Jing Guansheng suddenly laughed. Old Foren, are you really that heartless? You really want to stand by and watch Chu Chu's matter? What does Jing Chu Chu have to do with me? Ridiculous. Old Shinforen answered without hesitation. Good. Jing Guansheng sneered and suddenly swept a glance at Shin Miao. Since you want to destroy the bridge after crossing the river, then do not blame me for not being loyal. In the beginning you let Chu Chu climb onto Shin Qiu's bed and wanted me to think of ways to gain Shin Miao's favor. At that time you were not this heartless. When those words were said, everyone was shocked. Even though they had already guessed the inside story, they had never thought that Jing Guansheng would say such words in front of everyone. The one who was the most shocked was, of course, Luo Shuiyan. She looked at Jing Guansheng and slowly asked, "What did you say?" Jing Guansheng did not care about old Shinforen's furious expression and said like a broken jar, "Biaoshen most likely do not know. In the beginning when Chu Chu and I just came to the Shun residence, old Foren treated us warmly."
Why?
She said that she loved us siblings very much and hoped to be in-laws with the Jing family. But how would eldest Biao older brother like Chu Chu, who came from a small family? At that time old Foren had personally drugged her, and one think that she was in a hurry to facilitate the marriage, but did not think that at the end it was second Biao older brother who had the advantage. Luo Shuiyan was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She suddenly pulled out the flexible sword from her waist and placed it across Jing Guansheng's neck. Jing Guansheng's expression changed, but he still forced a smile and said, "Biaoshen has mistaken the wrong person this time. Both of us siblings know our own capabilities, and without old Foren's supervision, how would we dare to think about it? Besides, it was old Madam who drugged him. Shouldn't Auntie blame someone else?" Luo Shuiyan turned her head to stare at old Shinforen and her murderous aura soared. Old Shinforen was so scared that she almost fell down from her seat. She said, "Eldest, are you going to kill your mother? The old lady not only wants to marry my cousin, but also wants me to please my cousin." Jing Guansheng laughed frivolously. He also said that male and female love is just like that. When the rice is cooked, the person will be dead set. Luo Shuiyan couldn't take it anymore. She slashed the ground with her sword. The ground was originally made of good quality stone, but now that she slashed it, a clear crack appeared. Jing Foren screamed in fright, and old Shinforen's face turned pale. Shin Yu and Chen Roqiu were somewhat cowering, but Wan Yinyang's heart was astonished. She did not think that old Shinforen would even use such a cheap method. It was not strange for ordinary matrons or Yinyang to use such methods, but old Shinforen was the head of the family, and such methods were simply unsightly. Luo Shuiyan pulled Shin Miao with one hand and held her sword with the other as she looked at old Shinforen. When she was really angry, her murderous aura would surge out, making one believe without hesitation that she would be able to cut off old Shinforen's head in the next moment. She said, "Old Foren, ever since marrying into the Shun residence, both Shin Xian and I have treated you with deep affection. Even though you are not his birth mother, both of us husband and wife still respect you. But now I know that there are really white-eyed wolves in this world. I cannot afford to stay in such a Shin family." Chapter 347. Eldest, do not listen to his nonsense. Old Shinforen's evil intentions had not died. Do you want to be unfilial? Whether it is nonsense or not, one will know upon investigation. As for unfilial, Luo Shuiyan sneered and said word by word, "Even if this old mother has to carry the reputation of unfilial for the rest of her life, I will not let my children follow beside this kind of family." She pulled Shin Miao, "Go." No matter how furious old Shinforen was at the back, how the Jing family pestered endlessly, and how Qinruoqiu smoothed things out, all these things were not important anymore. Shen Miao was pulled by Luo Shuiyan towards the western courtyard, but her heart was very carefree. This was the goal that she wanted to achieve. Sometimes when one side of the story was said, it would make others feel that the strength was not enough. It was not because one was not willing to believe, but it was not an easy matter to separate from the family. This involved many entanglements of interests, and one might bear a lot of infamy. It was not an easy matter to make Shen Xian determined to separate from the family. But after today, the matter of separating from the family would be much easier. At least from now on, Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan would not have a trace of pity towards old Shinforen. As parents, when faced with someone harming their children, it was an instinctive protection. Luo Shuiyan pulled Shen Miao back to the room and first closed the door before taking a breath and sneering, "Your father and older brother went to the palace today. One should let them see with their own eyes what kind of goods these people are." Finishing, she suddenly thought of something and looked at Shen Miao apologetically. "Jiao Jiao, you must be frightened. Mother was just too angry." Shen Miao shook her head and looked at her. "What do we do next?" Mother said those words to old Foreign today. One feared that old Foreign would use this matter to blame Mother. "What is there to be afraid of?" Luo Shuiyan slapped the table. "Wait for your father to return, and we will discuss about the separation of the family. Everyone in the Shun residence do not have good intentions, and if this goes on, who knows what will happen." She touched Shen Miao's face and said, "No wonder you want us to stay in the capital for half a year more. Did you know about it long ago?" Shen Miao smiled and did not speak. Luo Shuiyan increasingly felt that the guess in her heart was correct. She got up and said, "No, I still have to investigate this matter. I will let the guards outside guard the courtyard door. Don't go out." He actually treated the Shen Fu as a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Shen Miao nodded her head, and after Luo Shuiyan left, Jingzhe asked, "Young lady, can one really separate from the family?" "Of course." Shen Miao lightly said, "My mother is one who cannot tolerate sand in her eyes, so naturally there is a need to separate." "That's great." Jingzhe said, "After separating from the family, young lady will have more freedom to do whatever she wants and need not guard against this, and that all day long." Bai Lu walked in and said to Shen Miao, young lady Tao Yuan has been sent out and settled in the manor with money." Shen Miao nodded. It was very easy to bribe Tao Yuan, who was by Jing Chu-Chu's side. Jing Chu-Chu originally planned to marry Shen Yuan and then make Tao Yuan a yin-yang to win over Shen Yuan's heart. What was non-committal was that Shen Yuan was extremely disgusted with the matter of him being schemed against, and if Tao Yuan was really promoted as a yin-yang, Shen Yuan would not treat her well. But Jing Chu-Chu still thought that she had done a great favor to Tao Yuan and did not know that Tao Yuan had already been bribed by others. She did not want to be a concubine, and also did not want to follow a master like Jing Chu-Chu. Tao Yuan risked her life and finally obtained her freedom. Shen Miao also did not disappoint her promise to Tao Yuan and gave her money to protect her life. A superior must know how to use both kindness and power to their subordinates. From today onwards, everything would be done according to what she wanted to do. Guyu said, "After second young master is beheaded, the residents will most likely calm down. At this time, it is the right time to separate from the family." Shen Miao smiled gently. How would it calm down? Not to mention that the Jing family was left for Sun Tianjing to deal with, but the second household's people were not completely dead yet. Second Shen must be very sad to know that second older brother was beheaded. Shen Miao said softly, "Is not second foreign crazy?" Guyu was surprised when she heard that if one is crazy, one would not have a mind. Listening to the people in Kai Yun Yuan, second foreign cannot even recognize people now, so how would she know about the matter? Crazy? Shen Miao shook her head. That might not necessarily be the case. When a person was in pain and despair, they would use crazy to escape the reality that they could not face. Ren Wanyun's most painful thing was that night in Wolong Temple. Her inaction made Xin Qing walk step by step to the final ending. She was powerless to change anything and could only watch helplessly as Xinqing died. She was unable to face Xinqing's death and was also unable to face herself, so she finally went crazy. Now that Xinyuan's death was spread back, one think that she would go crazy even more because she was still unable to help with Xinyuan's matter. In fact, Ren Wanyun's time of madness was not long. Whether she would choose to continue being crazy or not, it would depend on whether she could gradually accept the facts. One think that Ren Wanyun would wake up soon because she still had Xinyuan Bo, and she was afraid that Xinyuan Bo would fall into Wan Yinyang's hands. Shen Miao wanted Ren Wanyun to wake up in advance. What she wanted to deal with was never an individual, but the entire family's lifeline. Since she chose the second household, how could she stop moving forward after losing a pair of children from the second household? What she wanted was for Shen Gui's third generation to end. Chapter 348. 3 days later, the case of Shen Yuan accidentally killing Sun Kai-nan ended. Sun Tianzheng had the heart to take revenge for his only son's tragic death, and Shen Yuan was executed at the Meridian Gate. Countless commoners spread the news, and all of them wanted to see how this young genius who originally had a bright future would end up like this. Some people felt sympathy for Shen Yuan, and some people scolded Jing Chu for being a femme fatale. The noise was actually very lively. Shen Yuan probably never thought that he would have such a day. He was proud and arrogant, wholeheartedly wanting to climb up, wanting everyone to see his achievements. But now, he was being pointed at by the lowly commoners in his eyes. He probably felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. Even more people threw vegetable leaves and rotten eggs at Shen Yuan's body. The foul-smelling things covered Shen Yuan's body. Without thinking, it must be the Sun family's people. Shen Yuan knelt on the execution platform, and beside him was the executioner. Originally at this time, if the death row prisoner had a family member, they would be able to send the death row prisoner on his last journey, feed him food and drink wine on his way, but today no one from the Shen family came. Needless to say, Shen Xian was already like fire and water with the rest of the Shen family, so why would he come over? Shen Gui had always sought advantages and avoided disadvantages, and Ren Wanyun was even crazier. Old Shen Foreign's legs were inconvenient, but even if her legs were nimble, one feared that she would not come. The only strange thing was that the usually gentle and righteous third branch did not show up today. It seemed that he had to choose between being tactful and offending the Sun family for a long time before he made this decision. In the eyes of others, they could only sigh when they saw how the Shen family was behaving. Shen Yuan raised his head, and the scorching sun shone down on the Ding capital. It was obviously the new year, and the cold of the winter sun made the golden sunlight as dazzling as the summer. It was already noon. The executioner spat out a mouthful of wine, raised the ghost head broadsword, and chopped down. The saber fell. The crowd burst into cries of alarm. The women were so scared that they covered their eyes. The head rolled down the stage and into the crowd. After a while, blood spilled out. On the ground, Shen Yuan's eyes were wide open. He seemed to be a little confused, as if the head that had been separated from his body would say something in the next moment. Someone saw this and quietly turned around, disappearing into the crowd. At this moment, there was dead silence in the Shen residence. It was not that it did not happen if one did not mention it, but Shen Yuan's death had greatly damaged the Shen residence's vitality. Speaking of which, the Shen residence's heirs were not considered to be prosperous, and Shen Yuan was one of the best of the best. Such a rare person who might be able to support the Shen residence in the future died under the executioner's ghost head broadsword. At least the people of the Shen residence were not sad. Shen Yuan was sitting in the room when a manservant ran in and said, "The execution has been carried out. The people at the execution ground have already sent second young master back." When the Sun family finally agreed to return Shen Yuan's corpse to the Shen family, it was already a huge concession. Even though they did not openly fight with Sun Tianzheng and the matter of Shen Yuan was handled according to Sun Tianzheng's wishes, everyone knew that in the future, the Shen family and Sun family would have enmity. It all depended on how big the enmity was. After I bring him back, there's no need to stop the coffin. I'll bury him in a few days at the earliest. Shunwan sighed, his thoughts heavy. Master, are you still worried about this? Shinrochio walked over and said gently, Your Honor, we are also powerless in this matter. After all, the Sun family is not an ordinary family. I just feel that... Shunwan shook his head. Everything is not right. Did you not discover it? Shunwan said, recently the Shin family seems to have some bad luck, one after another mishaps. Could it be that there is something unclean? Shinrochio's heart was shocked. Shunwan was startled. What nonsense are you talking about? Chapter 349. Shinrochio quickly said, I am just speaking nonsense. Master must not be offended. She was somewhat vexed in her heart. Shunwan hated these strange matters the most, and with her unintentional words just now, she feared that Shinwan would be unhappy. She opened her mouth to echo Shinwan's words, speaking of it, but it seems that it is second older brother's family who have mishaps. First it was Chinger, then second sister-in-law, and now it is Yuanri. The more Shinrochio spoke, the more uneasy she felt. Even though she previously looked down on and was jealous of Renwan Yun, but after Renwan Yun went crazy, there seemed to be no one in the residence who could stand on the same line as her. Luo Shuiyan, Shin Xin, and Shunwan did not crawl out from the same mother's womb, so how could it be sincere? It is exactly so. Shunwan said, one do not know whose second older brother had enmity with. Now that one look at it, it seems that it was planned beforehand. It is inevitable that second older brother will offend some people in the officialdom tomorrow. Shinrochio said, but why did it have to happen this year? Thinking about it, it seems that ever since Fifth Lady woke up from falling into the water, things have been happening one after another. You would not say that it was done by Little Five? Shunwan found it funny. If Little Five had that kind of ability, one feared that the world would be in chaos. He patted Shinrochio's hands comfortingly. I know that these days you have been working hard. Do not let your imagination run wild. How would Little Five, a young lady, have such ability? It is said that eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law taught her, but eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law would not use such a blunt knife to grind meat. They have always been straightforward. Shunwan said, I will pay attention to this matter. You do not need to think too much and pay attention to Yuer's marriage, seeing that she is at the age to talk about marriage. Once Shun Yu's marriage was mentioned, Shinrochio suppressed her suspicions about Shin Miao. Shunwan valued heirs more than Shin Gui, and had never despised Shin Yu for being a daughter for so many years and truly loved Shin Yu. Shinrochio smiled. I will listen to Master. In the western courtyard, Shin Miao was putting on her clothes as Jingzhe helped her tidy up her hair. Second young master's coffin has been brought back, and one heard that it will be buried soon. Even the funeral will not be grand. In the Shin family, other than the first household, there were some who loved to put up a front. Just like how old Shin Furan's birthday celebration was known by the entire city, Shin Yuan, as the eldest son of the second household, did not even do the funeral after his death. It was indeed somewhat cold. Part of this was to cover up the scandal, but more importantly, there were not many people in the court who were willing to offend son Tianzheng for Shin Gui. Even if there was a funeral, there would not be many people who would come to offer their condolences. Instead, it would be a joke. Second Master has not been in the manor these past few days. Gu Yu also said, even if they return, they will rest in Wan Yinyang's courtyard. What kind of time is it now? In any case, they are one's own flesh and blood, to be so heartless. Shen Miao smiled. During the day he is busy winning over the estranged ministers, and as for the night, if he does not rest in Wan Yinyang's room, could it be that he is sharing the same bed and pillow with Second Shin? She originally wanted to take the opportunity to reprimand Shin Gui's heartlessness, but when Shen Miao said the words, sharing the same bed and pillow, Gu Yu was somewhat embarrassed. She did not know why Shen Miao was so bold now. It was obvious that there was nothing wrong with her etiquette, but why did she not know how to be shy in matters between men and women? It was also good to put on an act. Otherwise, in the future, when males see her, they would only be surprised by Xin Miao's valiance and who would dare to approach her? Xin Miao did not pay attention to Guyu's expression, thus, she did not know that Guyu had so many thoughts in her heart. She only said, "How is the news that was sent to the Sun family's side to inquire?" The Sun family hid it too tightly, and the servants know very little. Jingzhe quickly said, "One only know that Biao young lady's days are not good. Heard that on the first day, she could not continue. Chapter 350. What about the first day? Xin Miao turned her head and looked at Jingzhe. Jingzhe stammered, "One heard that on the first day, Biao young lady and the horses in the stables were fed with medicine and let them. At that time, old master's son even let all the servants watch from outside the stable." Guyu almost choked on her own saliva. Man and horse? Jingzhe's face turned red in an instant. Guyu was still asking. That Sun family's people are all abnormal. Jing Chu was in so much pain when a human and horse intercourse. This was not only physical pain. When so many servants saw her unbearable scene, one feared that her heart would rather die than live. Seeing that Guyu was still relentlessly questioning, Jingzhe was somewhat annoyed. He originally thought that these filthy things should not be said in front of Xin Miao as to avoid dirtying Xin Miao's ears. He did not think that when he turned his head over, he saw that Xin Miao's expression was calm. Not to mention shyness, there was not even a little bit of surprise on her face. Instead, she spat out a sentence that made one's teeth fall off. She said, "Sun Darren is too benevolent. Actually, one can use an ox." Young lady. Jingzhe's mouth was wide open. Xin Miao glanced at her. What is there to make a fuss about? In the inner palace, this move was often used to deal with disobedient females. She had not used it before as Xin Miao was used to directly bestow death and was not willing to create more complications. But one had seen Mei Foreign punish a palace maid who was eating with the eunuchs. She let someone feed her the aphrodisiac of a bull and, through that palace, made into the cow pen and tortured her to death. Thus, he was not surprised by Sun Tianjing's methods. He did not know how shocking his actions were in the eyes of Jingzhe and Guyu. After a long time, Jingzhe then found her voice and said, "Where does young lady want to go now?" "Let's go to Kaiyin Court." "What is young lady going there for?" Guyu was surprised. Now that second master is not around, is young lady going to look for Wan Yinyang? Xin Miao shook her head. "I am looking for second Xin. Second foreign has gone crazy." Guyu reminded. Not necessarily. The Kaiyin court had been turned upside down. In fact, in just a short few months, the entire Xin residence, or more accurately the second household of the Xin family, which was Kai Yunyuan, had undergone earth-shattering changes. The second madam, who used to be in her prime, was now a lunatic. The generous and intelligent eldest young miss had become a slut who committed suicide in prison and had an illicit relationship with another man. Even the outstanding second young master became a prisoner in front of the people of the city and died under the executioner's machete. Life was like a drama, and Kai Yunyuan's drama was too tragic. The only consolation was that second foreign Ren Wanyan still had a second son, Xin Yuanbo, but Xin Yuanbo was raised by old Xin foreign side. If Ren Wanyan was not crazy, with Xin Yuanbo, she would be able to temporarily sit firmly in the position of the main household. But it was only temporary. Who knew? Would Shen Gui still take concubines in the future? After all, Shen Gui had always been lustful. It was not impossible for him to have a son. Compared to Ren Wanyan's bad luck, Wan Yinyang, who had been deserted for many years, seemed to have ushered in spring. After being submissive for so many years, even her own daughter did not see the light of day for so many years. One did not expect that this time it was like she had the help of God. Even though Shen Gui was indifferent to kinship, he treated females well. As long as Wan Yinyang firmly grasped Shen Gui's heart and regained his favor, Shen Dongling's status would only rise. "Dongling, let master change a courtyard for you in a few days." Wan Yinyang was sewing as she smiled at Shen Dongling. Most likely it was because Xin Yuan was already dead and Xin Yuanbo was still young, Thus Ren Wanyan was no longer a threat to her. Wan Yinyang's brows were filled with joy, and there was a trace of joy in her words. Chapter 351. Change what courtyard? Shen Dongling, who was reading behind the screen, looked up. You have been squeezing in the same courtyard with me. Other young ladies at your age have already arranged their own courtyards, so you should also move out. This place is after all a little crowded. They are D daughters, and I am a Shu daughter, Shen Dongling said calmly. Hearing this, Wan Yinyang's heart ached. Shen Dongling's birth was a fact that she could not change, and it was also something that she was brooding over. She thought that Shen Dongling was not worse than Shen Qing and Shen Yu, but for the past 10 over years, she could only make Shen Dongling compromise. It was not easy to make it out, so how could she watch Shen Dongling continue to be so cautious? Wan Yinyang said, previously eldest young lady had a courtyard that was vacated, so you do not need to sleep in her room, and sleep in another room. Eldest young lady's courtyard has a good orientation and the scenery is beautiful, so it would be a pity to leave it empty. Now that master treats us well, one think that this request would be agreed. No need, Yinyang. Shen Dongling rejected her suggestion. Now is not a good time to stand out. One have endured for more than 10 years, and there is no need to rush for a while. Even though father treats us well now, Yinyang also understand what kind of temperament he has. It is better to wait for things to settle down before discussing this matter. Wan Yinyang still wanted to persuade further, but suddenly saw her personal maid Lu Hua running in, and hurriedly said, Yinyang, 5th young lady came to our courtyard. 5th young lady? Wan Yinyang suddenly stood up. Why did she come to look for me? Shen Dongling also looked at Lu Hua. Lu Hua shook her head and said, not to look for Yinyang. This servant saw that she went to the room where second foreign is recuperating. 5th young lady went to see second foreign. Wan Yinyang's voice suddenly rose. Why did 5th young lady look for second foreign? Second foreign has already gone crazy. This servant wanted to secretly eavesdrop, but 5th young lady brought along a few maids to block it. The rest of the people were far away from the room and could not hear or see. Lu Hua asked, Yinyang, what should be done now? Wan Yinyang walked around the room in bewilderment and muttered to herself, what is going on? Could it be that 5th young lady went to see second foreign? But second foreign and 5th young lady previously had many disagreements, so how could 5th young foreign be so kind? She looked at Shen Dongling. Dongling, what do you say? Shen Dongling lowered her eyes and thought for a moment before saying, since one cannot eavesdrop, then stay here obediently and do not ask. 5th younger sister is not a simple person. Since she has done it, she has made thorough preparations. No matter how many methods we use, I think we won't be able to find out. Could it be that this is over? Wan Yinyang was somewhat unwilling. What if she conspires with second foreign to do something? Second madam and 5th younger sister are not the kind of people who would forget enmity, with a smile. You and Shenling Shen Shen Shen, second Shen and the Shen Shen is Shen the Ling, Fuyang Shen Fu. Outside, you, Dong, in, Shen. Shen Ling Ling, Yu and Shen, Shen outside of Kai Yun Yuan, Guyu, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang stood a few steps away from the house, as Jingzhe followed Shen Miao into the house. The rest of the maids in the courtyard were doing their own things in a well-behaved manner. Ren Wanyun had already gone crazy, so the servants naturally did not need to fawn on her and rush to please her. People were like this, stepping on the weak and fawning on the strong. Moreover, Ren Wanyun's methods of treating the servants were harsh, so compared to Ren Wanyun, they were more willing to fawn on the gentle and virtuous Wan Yinyang. Thus, facing Shen Miao, who had the support of the first household, these maids did not stop her at all. But not everyone was like this. Ren Wanyun had her own confidants for so many years, and that was her personal maids, Xiang Lan and Kai Ju. At this moment in the room, Xiang Lan and Kai Ju were staring at Shen Miao like a tiger watching its prey. Chapter 352. Facing both of their fierce gazes, Shen Miao did not know what to do. Since both of them were not willing to go out, there was no harm in them hearing. On the bed, the foreign was wrapped in a blanket as she sat in the corner. Her eyes were lax and her hair seemed to be combed, but messed up by herself. There was even saliva dripping from her clothes. Her lips were slightly moving and she did not look at anyone but only looked up at the sky, not knowing what she was saying. Fifth young lady, now you have seen that our foreign's health is not well, and if you disturb like this, it will only worsen foreign's condition. Xianglan said. Today, I am here to tell Second Shun about a matter. Shun Miao smiled gently. One think that Second Shun already know about it. Even though she is ill, the news should still be sensitive. Second older brother was executed at noon today, and his body is lying in the coffin and will soon be buried. Fifth young lady, foreign is already ill. One cannot listen to these words. Kaiju shouted sharply. It was just that even though Xianglan and Kaiju had a stern expression, they really did not have the guts to make a move on Shin Miao and forcefully throw her out. Now they knew that Shin Miao was not a person that was easy to deal with. For the second household to be in such a situation, a large part of it was because of Shin Miao secretly adding fuel to the fire. Shin Miao could almost be counted as the second household's enemy, but now not only was Shin Miao scheming, she also had Shin Xian and wife backing her up. In this second household that was getting fewer by the day, no one dared to go against her. Shin Miao did not even bother about the two maids and looked at Ren Wanyun with a smile. One think that Second Shin also know that when second older brother was executed, there was no one in the residence to visit. Second Shu, third Shun. Old foreign, not a single one. She looked at Ren Wanyun. I think that if Second Shin was not ill, she would definitely go back to send second older brother on his last journey. Now on the road to the netherworld, second older brother would be alone. How pitiful. Fifth young lady. Xianglan could not help but shout again. What are you afraid of? Shin Miao's lips hooked up. Second Shun is now ill and would not understand my words. Could it be that you are afraid that I will agitate Second Shin? Naturally not. Xianglan quickly denied. Then you better stay obediently and shut up. Shin Miao raised her brows. Otherwise I have ways to make you never to serve your foreign. Xianglan and Kaiju were shocked in their hearts. The certainty in Shin Miao's words actually made them feel a chill run down their spines. Before second brother left, second aunt fell ill, so she didn't get to see second brother. I think second brother must be very sad in his heart. It's really sad that he didn't even get to see his parents when he died. Ren Wanyun was still staring at the ceiling with an infatuated look on her face. However, the fingers of the hand that was placed beside her bent slightly. A few days ago, Wan Yinyang came to look for me. Shen Miao smiled. It seems that she is anxious to build a good relationship with me. If in the future I speak a few good words for her in front of old foreign, then the possibility of second Shu supporting her as a Ping Fei would be much higher. When these words came out, Xianglan and Kaiju's complexion turned pale. Everyone knew that Wan Yinyang of the second household had regained favor. In the past, Ren Wanyun had forced Wan Shi to endure silently, and when Wan Shi gained power in one day and was even promoted to be the equal wife, would she not take revenge? She had already separated from Shin Gui and was also disliked by old Shin Foreign, so how miserable would Ren Wanyun's days be in the future? Naturally, I am not willing. Shen Miao tilted her head and thought about it. Second Shen is the main household in the residence, so naturally, I will stand on second Shen's side. But Wan Yinyang looked like she was not reconciled. Moreover, now seventh younger brother is still in front of old foreign, but when seventh younger brother grows up, Wan Yinyang would be promoted as a Ping Fei and second Shin. You are still ill. Wouldn't seventh younger brother be raised in front of Wan Yinyang? TSK, for Wan Yinyang to build a good relationship with me. Is it because of this consideration? Chapter 353. You dare to have any ideas on my seventh older brother. I will definitely make you wish you were dead. In the corner, Ren Wanyun roared. One did not know why her voice was so rough and unpleasant to listen to. And that pair of eyes that were staring at the sky from the moment they entered the room had unknowingly locked onto Shin Miao's body. There was a fierce glint like that of a vicious wolf. Why would I have any ideas on seventh younger brothers? Shen Miao gently smiled. If second Shin do not believe, I can swear that if I have any ideas on seventh older brother, then let the heavens strike me with lightning and die a horrible death. When the words were spoken, there was some surprise in the eyes of the few people in the room. Jingzhe, who had not spoken all along, was somewhat anxious. How could Shen Miao make such a heavy oath? They had always regarded oaths very seriously, and Shen Miao said it so calmly that she did not even have the chance to stop it. Ran Wanyin did not relax her vigilance against Shen Miao because of this and sneered. You tried every possible means to come here and say all these provocative words to see if I am crazy or not. It would not be just to make this poison oath, right? She said, Shen Miao, I cannot win against you. It is me who have underestimated you. If I can redo it, I will definitely kill you before you have grown to this age, and will not be soft-hearted. Second Shin really knows how to joke. Shen Miao said, when have you been soft-hearted towards me? You have already forced me to such a point, and Qing'er and Yuaner's mishap is not unrelated to you. If it was not for seventh older brother, I will definitely perish together with you. Ran Wanyin gritted her teeth. I know that second Shen is also not willing to perish together with seventh younger brother, so I also know that second Shen will not be sick for long. What exactly do you want to do? Ran Wanyin stared at her. What other means do you have? Do not hesitate to use them. Shen Miao smiled warmly. Second Shen need not be so unreasonable. I came here to give you a way out. Way out? Ran Wanyin said sadly. Since it has reached such a point, what way out do I have? Could it be that second Shen thinks that the current situation is the worst? Shen Miao was surprised. Second Shen has always been intelligent. How can one be so muddled?
What do you want to say?
Ran Wanyun's face sank. It's simple. Shen Miao smiled. Now in the courtyard, Wan Yinyang is coaxing second Shu until he is happy. Second Shen had never thought that if Wan Yinyang gave birth to a son for second Shu, what should seventh brother do? Ran Wanyun's body stiffened. Second Shen is also well aware of whether second Shu values Wan Yinyang or second Shen. Thus it is unknown whether second Shu values Wan Yinyang's son or seventh younger brother. If there was a day when Wan Yinyang was promoted to be a Ping wife, this second household would have 2D sons, but these 2D sons are not biological brothers. You guess. Shen Miao lowered her voice. Will they kill each other? Ran Wanyun's heart jumped when she heard this. That one has Wan Yinyang's protection. Seventh younger brother has second Shen's protection. But second Shen, at that time, will you still be able to speak in the second household like before? Shen Miao's words stabbed the heart, and Ren Wanyun could not help but retort. That slut did not give birth to a son before, and it is even more impossible for her to give birth to a son in the future. Second Shen is indeed smart. Shen Miao sighed. This is what I want to say. Could it be that second Shen thinks that other than Wan Yinyang, second Shu will not have any other woman? She was so magnanimous in discussing the matters between men and women of the elders, and her composure made one gasp in amazement. Ren Wanyun was surprised by Shen Miao's words. That's right. She was clearer than anyone else about Shen Guo's conduct. How could Shen Guo only have one woman? When she was still the matriarch, Shen Guo would bring concubines into the house one after another. If it was not for the fact that she fed those foxes the broth to end their offspring, one feared that the second household would be overcrowded. You see, one can guard against it for a while but not for a lifetime. Even if one can guard against one Yinyang, there will still be other Yinyangs. There are innumerable women in the world that can give birth to children, and there are also innumerable women that want to enter the second household. Unless second Shen can still control the inner courtyard like in the past and feed all of second Shu's women the broth to end their offspring, but does the current second Shen still have that ability? Even if there is, that year Wan Yinyang still gave birth to third older sister. In the future, will there be another Wan Yinyang? There was a little panic on Ren Wanyun's face. Shen Miao's words were stabbing a knife into her soft ribs. The only thing she could rely on was giving birth to a son. If she did not even have this, what would happen in the future? Second Shin, could it be that you want to see the family that you have worked so hard to manage, the money in the residence, in the end not be obtained by second older brother or seventh younger brother, but by another woman's son? Second older brother is brilliant and outstanding. It was obvious that everything in the second household should belong to him, but now someone else came into the house and made wedding clothes for others. Are you willing? Run Wanyan stared at Shin Miao. What do you want to say? I will give you a way out. Shin Miao smiled gently and took out a bag of things from her sleeves and placed it in Run Wanyan's hands. Infertility medicine for males to use, she said softly. Chapter 354. Infertility medicine for males to use. Run Wanyan lowered her head and looked at the paper bag that Shin Miao placed in her hands and could not help but tremble. How is it a good idea to give any Inyang an infertility medicine? Even if one cannot give birth to a son, there will be a second one, and a third one. Second Shin, you will not be able to guard against it all. Shin Miao's words seemed to be slightly bewitching, and when it landed on one's ears, it was pleasing to the ears. Why should I believe you? Who knows if it is arsenic inside? Ren Wanyun said contemptuously. If Second Shin does not believe me, naturally one can let the maids bring some out to ask the physician or find an animal to feed it. If it is not possible, one can throw it away and buy it yourself. I am only pointing the way, and Second Shin has to be willing to do it. Why do I want to do this? Run Wanyun stared at Shin Miao and said coldly.
Why?
Shin Miao thought for a moment. Most likely if Second Shu does not have the ability to bear children in the future, then seventh younger brother's D-son position would be stable. Not only that, as Second Shu's only successor, seventh younger brother would definitely be able to obtain Second Shu's favor. Things are precious when they are rare. Ran Wanyun smiled. Do you think that I do not know what you are planning? Shin Miao, I have underestimated you. You want the second household to have no descendants. Words cannot be said like this. Shin Miao pretended to be surprised. How can the second household be considered to have no descendants? Isn't there still seventh younger brother? But could it be that Second Shin thinks that in the future there will be another child with Second Shu? She jokingly said, even if Second Shin has this ability, it would also depend on whether Second Shu is willing or not. Presumptuous. Xiang Lan angrily rebuked. You do not know shame. Run Wanyun was so angry that her face turned red. Shin Miao's words were clearly ridiculing that she was old, and that Shin Gui, that kind of person who lusted after beauty, was dismissive of her. But Run Wanyun also understood that after so many years, Shin Gui was no longer as gentle to her as before. Her face was not attractive to Shin Gui, and it would be difficult to have another child. Be it shameless or presumptuous, one is after all thinking for you. Shin Miao smiled gently. I have already given Second Shin a way out. It is up to Second Shin to choose whether to walk out or block the road. She stood up and seemed to have thought of something. She tilted her head and said, Of course, second aunt can also tell second uncle about this. After all, you are a family. However, I have to remind you that my parents and old madam have already fallen out with each other. They've already shed all pretense of cordiality, so I'm not afraid of anything else. Run Wanyun sat down and did not speak as Xiang Lan and Kai Ju stared at Shin Miao vigilantly. That's all I have to say.
Goodbye.
Shin Miao smiled and walked out. After Shin Miao left, Xiang Lan stepped forward and looked at Run Wanyun to ask, Foreign, really want to listen to fifth young lady's words? Fifth young lady definitely does not have any good intentions. Kai Ju echoed. Her doing this is obviously to deliberately go against Master. It is going against Master. Run Wanyun said in a low voice. But now, Master and I are no longer on the same line. Madam means. Xiang Lan's eyes widened. Run Wanyun lowered her head and said, Let me think again. In the eastern courtyard, naturally, there were people paying attention to every move at this end. When Shin Miao and Zhang Zhe just stepped out of the door, they saw an unfamiliar maid coming over with a smile. Fifth young lady, Wan Inyang heard that you are in the courtyard and would like to invite you in for a chat. There are still some matters. Another day. Shun Miao did not give any face at all and directly refused. That maid was somewhat embarrassed but was helpless and could only watch Shun Miao and entourage walk away before turning around to report to Wan Yinyang. Chapter 355. Is she trying to draw a line with us? Wan Yinyang was somewhat angry, but there was more worry as she said to Shin Dongling, Dongling, could this fifth young lady be walking together with foreign and want to deal with us together with foreign? How is it possible? Shun Dongling shook her head. Because of eldest sister's matter, they would not be together. But why is fifth young lady always turning a blind eye to our good intentions? Wan Yinyang paced back and forth. Could it be that she looks down on our background? Speaking till here, her voice dimmed. After all, she is a young lady. Yinyang. Shun Dongling put down the book and said with some headache, what are you thinking about? Fifth younger sister is not willing to associate with us, and it is definitely not because of our own reasons. I see that fifth younger sister is not warm to the entire Shin residence, and one fear that she does not want to have any connection with the second household. Thus she turned a blind eye to us. Since that is the case, there is no use in fawning, and it is better to do less of such things in the future.
But
Wan Yinyang still wanted to say something. There is no but. Shin Dongling interrupted her words. As long as we abide by the rules and do not make any mistakes, naturally there will not be any trouble. At the other end, Jingzhe, who had returned to the room, was asking Shin Miao softly, young lady, will second foreign really drug second master? Of course. Shin Miao looked at her nails and said lightly, Ren Wanyun values children the most, and now that one son and one daughter have been lost, there is only Shin Yuanbo left. Unfortunately, Shin Gui is not a kind-hearted person, so only by drugging Shin Gui would one be able to preserve Shin Yuanbo's position. But what if second foreign tells second master about this matter? Guyu had been worried about this matter. No, if Shun Gui knew that he was drugged with an infertility drug, he would definitely hate Ren Wanyun to the bones. Even if Shin Yuanbo is his only child, he would also vent his anger on Shin Yuanbo. Even if Ren Wanyun wanted Shin Yuanbo to live well, she would hide this matter to death. Perhaps Shin Gui will never discover the fact that he is unable to give birth to a son. Even if the doctor had seen it, he would never think that it was Ren Wanyun who drugged him. Then, Jingzhe clenched her teeth and seemed to be hesitating before finally saying, even if second foreign secretly drugged second master, and second master really could not give birth to a son, isn't there still a seventh young master? The seventh young master is still young, but when he grows up and understands, he will probably seek revenge on Miss for the sake of the second young master and eldest young mistress. To raise an enemy since young, and young lady had made such an oath. Shun Miao said in front of Ren Wanyun that she must not have any ideas on Shun Yuanbo, otherwise the heavens would strike her with thunder. Such a heavy poison oath. Even Jingzhe was somewhat shocked to hear it now. Since the oath was made, I did not have any intention to hit Shin Yuanbo, Shin Miao said. Even so, seventh young master will definitely treat young lady as an enemy. Guyu reminded, there is an enemy that is always lurking in the dark. Let's wait until he grows up. Shin Miao smiled. Unfortunately, Shun Yuanbo did not have the chance to grow up. Just 1 year later, there was a plague in the Ding capital and Shin Yuanbo died because of smallpox. At that time, Shin Miao had already married to Fu Xiaoyi, and at that time the entire Ding capital was in a state of panic. Luckily, Shen Xian and the rest were fighting in the northwest region and escaped the calamity. It was still all right for the noble families in the city, but many of the poor commoners died. Shin Yuanbo was not able to escape the calamity. Shun Miao had always believed that heaven's justice was clear and karma was not good. It was just that one had to see if the retribution was enough. The sins that Shin Gui and wife did in the past lifetime was retribution on Shin Yuanbo. But the second household still had Shin Yuan and Shin Qing, and in this lifetime without Shin Yuan and Shin Qing, following the path of the previous lifetime, Shin Yuanbo would eventually lose his life. Chapter 356. Rather than being ruthless now, it was better to let them live with hope. Shin Gui thought that he still had a son, and Run Wanyan also thought that Xin Yuanbo would replace Xin Yuan, but there would be a day when Xin Yuanbo was unable to escape the heavenly Dao's misfortune. At that time, the seeds of despair hidden in the second household would break through the soil and drown the entire second household. The second household was destined to have no descendants, but now they were filled with hope, not knowing that the footsteps of misfortune were slowly approaching them, waiting for the scythe to fall and completely reap the lives of the entire household. The chess path was already prepared, and the chess pieces were moving forward step by step. Was this not good? Young lady, Mo Qing came over previously. Bai Lu walked in and said with some difficulty, he said that the banknotes that were previously given were all spent. Still need to go to Bao Xianglu? Bai Lu was somewhat embarrassed, and also somewhat did not understand. How would there be a master who would give money to the subordinate to find a young lady? Moreover, it was not an ordinary squandering. How was this letting the subordinate do the work? It was clearly giving money for the subordinate to enjoy. What was even more hateful was that Mo Qing got such a good job, and every time he would put on a look of pain that made one's teeth hurt. Go and take another 500 taels of silver for him,
Shin Miao said.
Bai Lu revealed a pained expression and heard Shin Miao instructing. Also let Mo Qing say that sentence to Luing. The few maids in the room were surprised for a moment and looked curiously at Shin Miao. After all, none of them knew what that sentence that Shin Miao said was. Just as Bai Lu was about to go out, she suddenly remembered something. Young lady, previously Rong Jing Tang's Zhang Mama came over and seemed to want to inquire about the matter of master and foreign separating from the family. Ever since that day when she heard the truth from Jing Guansheng's mouth, Luo Shuiyan and old Shin Foreign had a big fight, and she told the matter to Shin Xian. Naturally, Shin Xian was unable to restrain his anger, and immediately went to Rong Jing Tang to reason with old Foreign. Luo Shuiyan wholeheartedly wanted to separate from the family, and after the matter, Shin Xian was disheartened with the Shin family, and naturally agreed. Even if they did not want the assets that old General Shen had left behind, they still wanted to firmly separate from the family. Old Shin Foreign knew that she still needed to borrow Shin Xian's money and prestige, so in a moment of desperation, she pretended to faint from a stroke, which made one feel angry and funny at the same time. Now that Zhang Mama came to inquire about the news, naturally she wanted to probe the first household's intentions and thought that Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan only said so in a moment of anger. If she comes to ask again, tell her that we have made up our mind to separate from the family, and ask her to take good care of old madam. If old madam does not recover after a long time, it would be good to ask the elders of the family to come. The elders in the tribe had always looked down on old Shin Foreign's background, and when old General Shin was alive, he favored Shin Xian, so naturally the elders would be biased toward Shin Xian. When the people from the clan came to separate from the family, they would definitely not let old Shin Foreign get any benefits. This servant understands. Bai Lu smiled as she left the room. Shin Miao sat down in front of the table. This lifetime's journey had just begun, and one had to plan so much. However, it was not an easy matter to protect the Shin family at the same time as taking revenge. It had to be done step by step. These disturbances in the Ding capital were just a joke after one's meal. After talking about it, one would laugh it off, and no one would remember it. Even if it was a topic of conversation after a few days, it would be covered by fresh matters. When people die, the lights go out. The world was just that cold. Bao Xianglu was still as lively as usual. Recently, there was a new batch of Persian dancers who were beautiful and bold. All the aristocratic young masters in the capital flocked to them like ducks. Bao Xianglu's business was flourishing, but now it was almost overcrowded. Men were greedy for novelty and liked the new and hated the old. The new dancers were very popular for a while the former top courtesans seemed to be deserted and depressed. However, among these greedy men, there was one who was different. When he walked to the door, the young lady at the door waved her handkerchief and giggled. Master Mo, Today there is no need to order young Lady Luing, right? Chapter 357. Mo Qing placed the money in the young lady's hand and said, "Old rules." That young lady was half jealous and half envious as she said, "This lord is indeed a sentimental person. Luing is really a blessing that was cultivated in the previous lifetime." Finishing, she twisted her waist and went upstairs to call someone. When everyone was rushing over to the new young lady, Mo Qing was unshakable as he pointed at Lu Ying's name. Those who did not know would think that he had fallen in love with Lu Ying, but only he and Lu Ying knew whether he had fallen in love or not. Opposite Bao Xianglu, at the window seat of Kuai Huolu, 3 people were drinking with each other. Ji Shu pointed to Mo Qing's figure from afar as he entered Bao Xianglu. "Look, look." He went over again. "What is there to look at?" Gao Yang rolled his eyes at Ji Shu. "Go once every 3 days. 1 night at a time, and leave at dawn the next day, without staying for a moment longer. This is something that you've memorized by heart. Is there a need to be surprised?" Ji Shu was not to be outdone as he stared back at Gao Yang. "Are you stupid? We both know about this, but Xie Sanxiong has just come back. How would he know? I'm not trying to make it clear to him." Opposite of the two of them, Xie Jingxing was leaning on the sofa, lazily looking at Bao Xianglu. Today, for the first time, he did not wear purple clothes but wore a black narrow-waist long robe, making him look much colder. However, upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a travel-worn expression on his face. It was obvious that he had just returned from his journey. "Xie-san, how did it go? How are those people?" Gao Yang asked. "They're all death warriors. If we can't get anything out of them, we'll kill them all." Xie Jingxing was a little distracted. "Time is tight. We have to move quickly." "What is the use of moving fast?" Ji Shu complained. The thing was not found. Xin Yuan had previously made a move and was close to Fu Xiaoyi, so he might have some chips in his hands. But now that he is dead, Gao Yang muttered to himself, "Fu Xiaoyi should think of ways to find something from Xin Yuan's body. I want to make another trip to the Shun residence." Xie Jingxing frowned. "It is impossible not to find it." Hey, forget it, let's not talk about this for now." Ji Shu interrupted their conversation. "Speaking of which, we have been waiting here for so long and see this surnamed Mo running to Bao Xianglu every 3 to 5 days. What is the meaning of this? Could it be that Miss Xin treated her servants so generously? Even the money for the servant to look for the young lady was taken out as well. For such a cushy job, to be so generous, you are even more generous than me, the shopkeeper of Feng Xian Pawn Shop. Have you ever seen a girl run away at dawn every day?" Gao Yang looked at Ji Shu. "Why do I remember that when you look for young Lady Xiaoyao, you would always stay in others' boudoir and not leave, wishing that you could stick to her side every day? The spring night is bitter and short, so how would one be so unromantic? At least you would draw her brows and talk to her. Leaving within 2 hours every time, it is like completing a task. Have your eyes grown to the sky?" Xie Jingxing glanced at the two of them. "Can't you see that there's someone on the other side?" His eyes swept downwards and the other two were surprised for a moment. Following Xie Jingxing's gaze, they saw a green-clad male standing at the corner of the street opposite Bao Xianglu, looking at Lu Ying's little building in a daze. "Looks rather ordinary," Ji Shu said, seeing him dressed so shabbily. "One look and one can tell that he wants to go in to look for a young lady. Does he have money to satisfy his craving? What is the difference? This person?" Gao Yang looked from afar. The figure is somewhat familiar, as if one had seen it somewhere.
Pei Lang.
Xie Jingxing said. "Who is Pei Lang?" Ji Shu asked. "Guangwen Tang's teacher. I remember." Gao Yang also said, previously seen him at the palace banquet. But what is he doing here? Chapter 358. Teacher? Ji Shu swallowed his saliva. Teacher also came to visit the brothel? This Guangwen Tang was said to be the academy that all the noble families in the Ding capital had to enter, So how could a teacher be so morally corrupt? You visit the brothel all day. Why is it not morally corrupt? Gao Yang asked Ji Yushu. Ji Yushu retorted, I do not teach students. Shut up. Xie Jingxing said, such a big person is here, and both of you did not discover it. I also do not know him. Ji Yushu felt wronged. There are so many people coming and going outside Bao Xianglu, and I only pay attention to the abnormal. This gentleman did not look any different, so how would I know that he is a teacher? Gao Yang looked at Xie Jingxing. You feel that there's a problem with Pei Lang? But he is just a poor scholar. Shen Miao never do unnecessary things. There must be a reason for her subordinate to look for Luing. Previously, I did not understand, but after seeing him, I understand. Xie Jingxing's eyes landed on Pei Lang in the distance. You are saying... Gao Yang was deep in thought. This Shen Miao took such a big detour, and it was actually directed at Pei Lang? Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up into a smile, and there seemed to be a deep meaning in his eyes. One do not know why, but feel that Shen Miao especially values this Pei Lang. From the things that were investigated, Pei Lang is just a poor scholar, so there must be a problem. This is not simple. Ji Yushu exclaimed, I know the reason behind it. Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing turned their heads to stare at him. Ji Yushu coughed and said with a beaming smile, too simple. I looked at the figure and saw that this person should be a jade tree with extraordinary looks, and in addition he is a teacher, so he would definitely show that he is knowledgeable. Shen young lady is after all in her budding years, and when such a young lady met a talented and good-looking teacher, it would be the first awakening of love, and her heart would be in love. Who would have thought that the teacher is a hypocrite who visits the brothel? In a fit of anger, Shen young lady simply let her subordinate to buy that courtesan's brand.
Wait.
Gao Yang asked, why Shen Miao likes Pei Lang but buy Lu Ying's brand? Ji Yushu thought hard for a while before replying, most likely it is because Pei Lang could not afford to buy Lu Ying's brand, so Shen young lady let the servants buy Lu Ying's brand. Pei Lang could not even be compared to a servant, so he must be angry in his heart. Shen young lady wants to anger Pei Lang to death. The more Ji Yushu spoke, the more excited he became, until his saliva flew and he almost climbed onto the table. You all look. Pei Lang had seriously injured young Miss Shen. You're just a young lady, yet you're willing to throw away 1,000 pieces of gold for your beauty. Gao Yang held his forehead with a headache. Ji Yushu, did you listen to some inexplicable drama in the brothel again? You guys have fun, I'll leave first. Xie Jingxing stood up expressionlessly and glanced at Ji Yushu. If you are bored and the tower prison lacks people, then pack up and go over with Tai Yi. Ji Yushu immediately became like a frosted eggplant and did not make a sound. On the other side, in the Firefly hut, Mo Qing was still sitting at the table drinking tea, as usual. Lu Ying had now completely given up on Mo Qing. Previously, she still wanted to conquer this man, but now she did not even have any thoughts of conquering and had completely lost her temper. Thus, she did not even comb her makeup and walked over to pick up the silver ingot that Mo Qing placed on the table and put it into the box. She then sat opposite Mo Qing and poured a cup of tea to take a sip before saying in a lukewarm manner, many thanks to Gentleman Mo for supporting Lu Ying as usual, so that Lu Ying would not be unable to eat in such a bad time. When the other young ladies were snatched away by the new Persian dancers, only Mo Qing continued to support her. The young ladies in the building were extremely envious and jealous of Lu Ying, but did not know that in Lu Ying's eyes, Mo Qing was just an eccentric person. Chapter 359. Most likely Mo Qing liked to take the money and stare blankly in the brothel. Lu Ying also did not intend to chat with Mo Qing. This Mo Qing had come over so many times, but he never spoke a word to her. If it was not that he would speak to the young lady downstairs, Lu Ying would think that Mo Qing was a mute. But today, Mo Qing had spoken to her for the first time. Mo Qing said, "It is not me." She was too surprised that Lu Ying could only stare at him. "Ah. The one who gave you the money is not me," Mo Qing said. Lu Ying was puzzled. "What monies?" "My master wants me to come here. every 3 days to look for you and give you the money and do nothing. This was most likely the longest sentence that Immerse had said since he came to Bao Xianglu, but when the words were spoken, Lu Ying's eyes suddenly became vigilant. She stood up. "Who is your master?" Immerse shook his head. "Cannot say."
You.
Lu Ying glared at him. "Master said that after a few more days, she will come and see you." Immerse said, "Do not receive other guests for the time being." Lu Ying smiled. "Eldest brother, I do not know who your master is, and do not know what he wants to do, but I am a young lady of Bao Xianglu, and now that the economy is so bad, I am not the top card that was just made famous. If I do not receive other guests, what would I eat or drink? You will support me." Immerse did not say anything. Seeing that Immerse did not say anything, Lu Ying became even angrier, and a nameless fire rose in her heart. At this time, no matter if it was sincere or not, other males would still say a few comforting words, "I will support you." Even if it was to deceive others, no one would take anyone's words seriously in the brothel. This Immerse was good. He was simply a blockhead and loved to be serious, not even willing to say a few good words to deceive others. Once he got angry, he wanted to coax others, but just as he opened his mouth, Lu Ying became silent again. Immerse was indeed not a person in the brothel, and he himself said that he was only acting on his master's orders. Thinking of this, she felt that it was meaningless to ask him about these things. Immerse saw Lu Ying's expression changing, and was somewhat baffled. He hesitated for a moment before saying the words that Shen Miao did not instruct him to say. He said, "My master is a good person, you don't be afraid." Lu Ying was surprised for a moment and looked at Immerse, but Immerse lowered his head to drink his tea. Inexplicably, Lu Ying's mood became better and she said, "Why should I believe you?" Immerse. That night, there were no stars and no moon. Shen Miao stayed in Luo Shuiyan's room and chatted with Luo Shuiyan before preparing to return to her courtyard. On the way, Jingzhe told Shen Miao about the news that she had inquired during the day. "Young lady, one heard that the Jing family will set off for Suzhou this afternoon, and before leaving, they took away all the valuable furnishings in Rongjing Tang's side courtyard. This is really like a robber's action." Old Foreign was so angry that she almost had a stroke again. This stroke again was said with a hint of mockery. Everyone knew that when old Shin Foreign was flustered and exasperated, she would involuntarily have a stroke. But now it could be considered that she had met her match. The shameless one had met an even more shameless one. Speaking of which, one really admired the Jing family's face. To be able to take away Rong Jing Tang's things with such ease, it was really strange to the extreme. One did not think that the Jing family would speak in such a dignified manner and solemnly vow to seek an explanation for Biao Young Lady, but now they returned to Suzhou with their tails between their legs, so Biao Young Lady did not care. Knowing that Biao Young Lady would not have a good ending in the Sun family, but did not think of any way at all. Originally, they said it so ruthlessly, but it was only to ask for more money. Jingzhe said, "Commoners do not fight with officials." Shen Miao's lips slightly hooked up. One think that the Jing family also know that they have caused a big disaster. Not a good person. Jingzhe's lips twitched. Shen Miao declined to comment. The Jing family rushed back to Suzhou through the night, but how could they rush back in time? Sun Tian Zheng was not a soft persimmon. Initially, when Shen Xiao had an accident, Jing Chu escaped, but the rest of the Jing family did not escape. Sun Tianzheng was never a soft-hearted person, so no one knew what happened on the way back to Suzhou. Just as they walked to the courtyard, Shen Miao was about to push the door open to enter when she suddenly paused and swept a glance at the window. "Jingzhe," Shen Miao said, "go and boil the water first. I want to bathe. Make it hotter." Jingzhe was startled for a moment before nodding her head in agreement. Shen Miao pushed the door open and walked in. She walked past the outer hall, past the folding screen, and walked into her own boudoir before closing the door. The light of the oil lamp swayed slightly, and one could see a person sitting crookedly in front of the table. His robe seemed to be flowing dark gold, making the darkness in the room shine brightly. He propped his head up with one hand, and the other hand was flipping through the books on Shen Miao's table in boredom. When he heard movement, He casually turned his head and revealed a handsome face with red lips and white teeth. "Why did you return so late?" Xie Jingxing was somewhat dissatisfied. "I did not seem to have invited you." Shen Miao looked at him calmly. "Little Marquis Xie, I waited for you for a long time." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. "I am already hungry." Shen Miao said, "Get lost." Chapter 360. Get lost. Hearing that, Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up and turned his head to look at Shen Miao with interest. "Long time no see. Your temper is getting more and more irritable." Shen Miao sat down in front of the table and said coldly, "You still like to come uninvited as usual." If Xie Jingxing was seen in her room, one did not know how much trouble it would cause. But this person always liked to do such things, as if there was danger in his bones. Shen Miao had already decided to stay away from Xie Jingxing as the other person had too many secrets, and now Xie Jingxing came over himself. How could she not be angry? "Passing by this place, and conveniently came over to see you." Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders and changed to a more comfortable position. Today he was wearing plain clothes with a white collar. It was the season of snow, but because of his outstanding brows, the room was filled with the feeling of spring. He stroked his chin and said, "There is one more thing to ask you."
Speak.
Shen Miao was not willing to say a word more to him. When Xie Jingxing saw Shen Miao's attitude, he was not annoyed and said, "Is there anyone in the residence that Shen Yuan trusts?" Hearing that, Shen Miao looked at Xie Jingxing with some surprise. She did not think that the person that Xie Jingxing wanted to ask was Shen Yuan. Even though she was not clear of Xie Jingxing's purpose, she still said, "No." Shen Yuan's return to the capital was short, and he is not close to the people in the residence. "Why did you ask him?"
Just came over from his courtyard.
Xie Jingxing said lazily. "Did not find anything, so came over to ask." Shen Miao's eyes drooped as she pondered. Could it be that Xie Jingxing wanted to find something at Shen Yuan's place but could not find it, so he thought that Shen Yuan had passed the thing to someone he trusted. Thus he inquired from her. "What exactly are you looking for?" Shen Miao asked. "Is it the same as the thing in Prince Yu Residence's secret chamber?" When the words were said, the room suddenly became quiet for a moment. For a moment, Shen Miao could feel the biting cold air that burst out from Xie Jingxing's side. But that dangerous atmosphere only lasted for a moment, and very quickly Xie Jingxing laughed. When he laughed, he was as elegant as jade, but that pair of peach blossom eyes could not conceal the sharpness. Xie Jingxing did not answer Shen Miao's words but asked, "These days you are also living well. One heard that the second household of the Shen family is about to be defeated." Little Marquis knows the matters of the Shen residence like the back of his hand. If one did not know, one would think that you are from the Shen residence. Shen Miao ridiculed. Xie Jingxing spread out his hands. "No choice. The Shen residence's guards are like decorations, and the things that happened were interesting, so it would be hard to not know." He sized up Shen Miao. "It is just that I have underestimated your ruthlessness. You can give it a try too." Xie Jingxing looked at her with a smile. "I don't have that much time." "It sounds like you are very busy." Shen Miao stared at him. "But you have so much free time to visit other people's mansions." When she said this, she showed a little anger. Xie Jingxing could always easily draw out the little emotions in her heart. If Jingzhe, Gu Yu, and the rest were to see this, they would definitely be shocked by Shen Miao's current expression. Because it had been a long time since Shen Miao had revealed such frank emotions. Whether it was anger or annoyance, these were all things that the previous Shen Miao would have. Xie Jingxing said, "Young lady's temper is always so heavy." Shen Miao said in a bad mood, "The questions have already been asked, and you are still not leaving." Xie Jingxing stood up and patted his clothes. He really opened the back window and planned to leave from the window when he suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at her strangely before asking, "Almost forgot to ask you. Shen Miao, do you admire Peiling?" Shen Miao. Before she could speak, she saw Xie Jingxing looking at her from head to toe with disdain in his eyes. It should also be useless. His figure disappeared in a blink of an eye. Chapter 361. This bastard. Shen Miao almost ground her teeth. But one saw Jingzhe knocking on the door from the outside. Young lady, the water has started to boil. This servant will help you put in the spices. Upon entering, she asked curiously, why is young lady standing in front of the window? Be careful not to catch a cold. Shen Miao withdrew her gaze. Nothing, I just chased away a wild cat. A wild cat. Jingzhe smiled. It is common for wild cats to appear in this season, but they only disturb one's dreams. One will chase them out tomorrow to save trouble. It is better to add arsenic. Shen Miao said, clean death. Jingzhe was somewhat puzzled. At the other end of the Shen residence, Wan Yinyang's eyes were filled with worry and seemed to be somewhat resentful as she said to Shen Dongling, one do not know what fifth young lady said to Furen that day, but these days the servants in Kai Yunyuan said that Furen's illness is getting better day by day. Now that he recognized him, he didn't throw a tantrum. Now that he was able to do things, he even asked the servant beside him to cook porridge for his master. It seemed like he wanted to regain his master's favor. If that day really comes, I'm afraid that it will be another day of suffering for us. Wan Yinyang was somewhat complaining. It seems that fifth young lady really want to help Furen and even treat Furen's illness. Shen Dongling was combing her long hair in front of the table. When she let her long hair down, it just so happened that she was facing the light, and the pale color on her face eased up a bit. Her face became even sharper, and her eyes were big. She was a vivid little beauty. She said, Yinyang is worrying too much. No matter how great fifth sister's ability is, it is impossible for her to bring the dying back to life. It seems that Madam has always been pretending to be crazy. Fifth younger sister said something to her and made her think it through and stop pretending. What? Wan Yinyang was shocked. Linger, you said that Furen had been acting crazy all along. Then for so long, Master has been taking care of us. Isn't it all seen by Madam? Once Madam has the chance, she will definitely not let us off. What's there to worry about, Aunt? Shen Dongling casually combed her hair with a silver comb as she said, because of Dijie and second brother's matter, Father already looks down on Furen. Even if Madam really woke up, Father would at most be tolerant towards her on the surface, but in his heart, he would definitely be disgusted. It is impossible for Furen to regain her previous position, and Furen herself knows this. Yinyang can relax. Wan Yinyang was puzzled, since Furen knew that Master would not forgive her. Why did she not continue to pretend to be crazy? What did Fifth Miss say to her that made her change her mind? Madam has nothing but seventh younger brother now. Fifth younger sister is probably making a fuss about seventh younger brother's matter. Yinyang must also work hard to give father a son. No matter if it's a bastard son or a legitimate son, as long as you give birth to a son, you'll be able to stand firm here in the future. No one will dare to step on your head. Wan Yinyang smiled bitterly. How would she not want to give birth to a son? In the early years, she was completely suppressed by Ren Wanyun, and if she did not give birth to Shen Dongling, who was a daughter, both mother and daughter would not be able to live until now. Now Ren Wanyun was crazy, but Shen Gui had always been fickle in relationships, and she was not a young female, so how could she keep Shen Gui's heart? How could they coincidentally give birth to a son? As her thoughts ran wild, Wan Yinyang diverted the topic. What is the use of saying all these? Linger might as well guess what fifth young lady is trying to do. Helping Furen is the same as going against us. That might not be so. Shen Dongling shook her head. Fifth younger sister is not a simple person, and currently our position in the second household is not high. Even so, it is already very good. In short, do not get involved in these matters and live your own life. Otherwise, one would accidentally invite trouble upon oneself. Chapter 362. Wan Yinyang listened with fear and trepidation and asked tentatively, so, do not look, do not ask, and do not speak. Shen Dongling looked at herself in the mirror. Let nature take its course. There will be a day when we can live a good life. In the Shun residence, not only the people of Kai Yun Yuan were discussing about the matter, in Qiu Shui Yuan, Run Wan Yun's name was also mentioned. Chen Roqiu was wearing a plain white robe as she sat on the bed and said, "Second Saw's health is getting better." "Master, what did second older brother's side say?" Shun Wan rubbed his forehead. Because of Shun Yuan's matter, the colleagues in court were quite critical of the Shun family. Even he was implicated, and these days were not easy. He shook his head. Second older brother did not mention about this matter. Even if second Saw is really well, the second household would only be left with seventh older brother. Chen Roqiu said, second older brother's temperament is, in the future when each household brings concubines back, one fear. Speaking till here, there was a feeling of the fox grieving for the rabbit's death. The difference between her and Renwan Yun was that Chen Roqiu was able to firmly grasp Xinhuan's heart, but the third household did not have any sons, and now that Xinhuan was dead, in old Xinfuan's eyes, one fear that she was anxious to let her two sons bear branches and disperse leaves. Shun Gui's side was unfilial and was not a devoted person, but on Xinhuan's side, if he was pressed, Chen Roqiu could not help but panic. How long could a man's favor last? But her stomach did not live up to expectations. Xinhuan noticed that Chen Roqiu's expression was ugly and asked puzzledly, "What is wrong with you? Is your body not feeling well?" Chen Roqiu forced a smile and shook her head, just thought of eldest brother and eldest Saw's matter. After a pause, Chen Roqiu then said, "Eldest brother and eldest Saw have already decided to separate and even threatened to invite the elders of the family. One fear that they are not afraid of carrying the charge of being unfilial. This matter was not handled properly by mother." Xinhuan said, "Being held by others, and if eldest brother was angered, he would mention the matter of mother framing Qiu'er, and the entire capital would poke our backbones." Chen Roqiu nodded her head. "Correct. Most likely it is because of this point that eldest brother and eldest Saw are so sure." Chen Roqiu said, "It has been peaceful for so many years. Why is there a need to separate at this juncture?" She could not help but think of Shen Miao. Ever since Shen Miao's temperament changed, many things in the Shen residence had quietly changed. In the past, Shen Xian and wife treated the rest of the Shen family well, but that was because Shen Miao treated them well. Now that Shen Miao showed her dissatisfaction, Shen Xian and wife's attitude immediately changed. Xinhuan sighed as Chen Roqiu asked, "Master, is there any leeway to turn this matter around?" Xinhuan shook his head. "If it were us, we wouldn't be able to accept it either." Big Brother and his family were people who couldn't tolerate a grain of sand in their eyes, and the one they valued the most was Xiaowu. The Jing family and mother conspired against Qiu'er and Xiaowu, which was a taboo of eldest brother. They were already being merciful by only separating from the family. If it was eldest brother's temper in the past, I'm afraid he would have flipped this Shen residence upside down. But Chen Ruoqiu said, "It's not a good thing for us to separate now." Xinhuan looked out of the window. Now that the second household has suffered heavy losses, second older brothers and my career are blocked. In the past, we could still rely on eldest brother's influence, but once the family is separated, everyone would know that the Shin family is not in harmony, and to curry favor with eldest brother, they would not associate with us. The Shin family's road would only be more difficult. Not only that, the money in the public purse. Chen Roqiu reminded. In the past, Shin Xian's rewards were numerous, but he was unable to spend it all year round in the northwest region, so he handed it all over to the public purse. Old Xinfuan spent money extravagantly, and Renwan Yun occasionally had to subsidize it, so he lived like this. Now that the family was separated, even if Shin Xian did not want the assets that the old general left behind, their days would only get more difficult. Chapter 363. If it is only like this, then it is fine. Xinhuan's eyes flashed a trace of gloominess. After the separation of the family, with eldest brother's military strength and reputation, he would only get better, and at the end, he would suppress us. Comparing the two powers, One would have to reach this step. Chen Rochio's heart was shocked when she heard it. She had been married to the Shun residence for so many years and naturally knew of the Shun residence's appearance. Shun Xian and wife were not in the residence all year round, so they did not know, but she and Renwan Yun were well aware of it. In this Shun residence, Shun Xian and Shun Gui brothers did not crawl out from the same mother's womb so naturally it was not sincere. The better Shun Xian lived, the worse the other two households would be. There would be a day when everyone would be in opposition, but one did not think that this situation would come so quickly. Master, even if it is for Yuer, one cannot let us be suppressed. Chen Rochio massaged his shoulders. But how to deal with them? Now that eldest brother is wary of us, it would not be that easy to take action. Shunwan shook his head. Moreover, his soldiers are not ordinary, so it would be harder to find loopholes. One must wait for an opportunity. Shunwan said, the most urgent matter is to find a good family for Yuer. Pay attention these days. Chen Rochio probed, Master, His Highness Prince Ding. First, one must not have any ideas on Prince Ding. Shunwan said sharply, just after the matter of Yuan, the people in court are afraid of getting involved with the Shin family, and one need to pay more attention to the princes. If one were to think of Prince Ding at this time, Prince Ding would not be happy. Chen Rochio nodded her head. This concubine understands. Master should also rest early. On the morning of the second day, Xin Miao had just eaten when she saw Shuang Jiang panting as she ran in. Upon entering the room, she said, Young lady, something happened. Speak slowly if there is something to say. Why are you so anxious? Guyu reprimanded. Shuang Jiang stuck out her tongue, but still could not hold it back and spilled everything out. A few days ago, did the Jing family not set off back to Suzhou? Today the officials from that side said that the Jing family met with bandits on the way back and were all killed by the bandits. Knowing that the Jing family and Old Foreign have some relations, the officials then came to inform. Shuang Jiang patted her chest and said with lingering fear, now this bandit is getting more and more rampant. They dare to kill people in broad daylight and did not leave a single person alive. If one knew it was like this, the Jing family would regret coming to the Ding capital. Xin Miao's eyes drooped down. Whether the Jing family was silenced by bandits or not, it would depend on one's thoughts. But Shen Miao knew that Sun Tianzheng's methods had always been swift and decisive, just like in the court. This matter started because of Jing Chu and Sun Kainan lost his life. How could Sun Tianzheng be willing? Shen Miao believed that if it was possible, Sun Tianzheng could not wait to silence the entire Shen family. But the Shen family wasn't the Jing family. The Jing family would still have the same ending as in the previous lifetime, losing their lives because of Jing Chu's greed. Now that Jing Chu was still in Sun Tianzheng's hands, Sun Tianzheng would not let Jing Chu die easily. To live in despair like this was perhaps more painful than death. But this had nothing to do with her anymore. Xin Miao said to Guyu, what about the prepared things? Guyu said, it is in the chest, but... Guyu was somewhat hesitant. Young lady, you really want... Go and get it. Xin Miao interrupted her words. After an hour, four people walked out of the western courtyard side door of the Shun residence. Among the three of them, the leader was a young gentleman with delicate features. He was wearing a moon-white robe and a hat, and could be considered as an elegant gentleman. It was just that he was a little short, but he was somewhat adorable like a carved jade. His pair of bright eyes were rarely clear. With this kind of looks, he would be sought after even in a small brothel. Chapter 364. Following closely behind him were two people dressed as attendants. But when he walked, he was a little clumsy and awkward. Behind the follower was a guard. Compared to the three of them, he was much taller. Do not be afraid. Shen Miao said, be more courageous and do not give yourself away. These three people were not others but Shen Miao, Jing Zhe, Gu Yu, and Mo Qing. Jing Zhe and Gu Yu were not used to wearing male's clothing, so they had a sullen face and were somewhat afraid, but Shen Miao was very calm, which made Mo Qing's heart have some misgivings. However, she did not know that when she was a hostage in the Qin state, she was teased by the royal family. They made her dress up as a man for several months. Now that he was acting, he looked very lively. When the three of them boarded the carriage, Mo Qing personally drove the carriage and Guyu asked Shen Miao, "Young lady, are we really going to Bao Xianglu?" "Of course."
But
Guyu said, "We have words that cannot be said outside. If someone sees young lady visiting a brothel," she could not continue because Guyu did not know what would happen when a female visited a brothel. Bao Xianglu is a business place, and a business place only needs to pay money. Those who visit the brothel do not care about etiquette and morals, and it is originally a place to indulge in debauchery.
no one would notice if they were to put on a show.
Jing Zhe and Guyu looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Shen Miao's ideas were very big, and once she decided on something, even 9 bulls would not be able to pull her back. Moreover, there would always be all kinds of high-sounding reasons. Now that he had come this far, he could only wait and see. In the elegant room of Kuai Huolu, someone lifted the curtain and walked in. Ji Yushu said, "Third older brother Xie, you came just in time. There is something to tell you, Prince Ding."
Huh.
Gao Yang suddenly exclaimed. His hand that was holding the wine cup paused as he muttered to himself, "Why is it different this time?" "What's different?" Xie Jingxing said as he sat down by the window. He poured himself a cup of tea and followed Gao Yang's gaze. Below Bao Xianglu, a horse carriage stopped and a few people came down. The person in the lead was Mo Qing. Behind Mo Qing, there were 3 youths that followed. In the past, the one with the surname Mo always came and went alone. Why are there so many people here today? Is this also Shen Miao's order? Gao Yang propped his chin up and sized him up. "Let me see." Ji Yushu stretched his neck to take a look and a flash of inspiration appeared. Could it be that Shen Young Lady is actually using money to reward servants who do well? If the servants did a good job, they would be rewarded with a day trip to Bao Xianglu. I also want to be a servant in Shen Young Lady's residence. Step aside. Gao Yang pushed Ji Yushu's head away and said, "Why do I feel that these few people look somewhat familiar?" Before he finished his words, he saw Xie Jingxing spurt out a mouthful of tea. "Third brother." Ji Yushu, who was sprayed all over, jumped up in a flurry and said angrily as he tidied up his clothes, "What are you doing?" Xie Jingxing ignored him and stared at the few people downstairs in surprise. They actually came by themselves. "Myself?" Gao Yang caught on to the meaning behind his words and looked down carefully. When he saw it clearly, he almost fell over on his back. Who else could it be if it was not Shen Miao, who was the leader that was carved from jade? Under the heavens, there were really females who dressed as males to visit brothels. If one did not see it with one's own eyes, Gao Yang would have thought that such things would only appear in dramas. Shen Miao followed Mo Qing into Bao Xianglu. When the young lady at the door saw Mo Qing, she went up to greet him with a smile. "Lord Mo, it is better to pick young lady Lu Ying." Mo Qing nodded his head. That young lady then seemed to notice the few people behind Mo Qing and hesitated for a moment. These few? Chapter 365. Together with me, Mo Qing said. That young lady was surprised for a moment before thinking of something and looked at Mo Qing mischievously. One did not think that Master Mo would have this kind of taste. No matter, the more people there are, the livelier it is. When Jing Zhe and Guyu heard it, their faces immediately turned red, and Mo Qing also felt somewhat uncomfortable. The calmest person in the group was only Shen Miao. That young lady led them to Lu Ying's little building. Mo Qing had almost become a frequent visitor of Bao Xianglu, and there was no young lady who did not know of him. Thus it was not strange at all. It was just that it was rare to see such delicate and pretty gentlemen like Shen Miao and the rest, especially Shen Miao, who looked like she was carved from jade. From time to time there would be young ladies who would look over with a smile. When they reached Lu Ying's little building, the young lady who led the way knocked on the door and spoke. "Lu Ying, Master Mo is here to see you." Finishing, She then said to Enchanting and the rest, "This servant will go down first." Enchanting pushed the door open and walked in. There was a female sitting in front of the dressing mirror with clothes loosely draped over her body, and her black hair was like a waterfall as she was dressing up in front of the mirror. Hearing the commotion, she did not even turn her head back as she said, "You came early today." Jingzhe and Guyu looked at Enchanting strangely before Enchanting coughed twice. "Not only me." Lu Ying's hand that was dressing paused, and when she turned her head over, she was first startled when she saw Shen Miao and the rest before a trace of anger climbed up her pretty face. What is the meaning of this? Not waiting for Enchanting to finish, Lu Ying sneered. "If you want to play like this, it is possible, but you have to pay twice the amount of money." When the words were said, not only Jingzhe and Guyu, even Shen Miao looked at Enchanting strangely. Enchanting was somewhat embarrassed as he did not know why Lu Ying, who treated him with a much better attitude a few days ago, flew into a rage today, and that kind of cold alienation started to appear again. "Young lady Lu Ying, this one is Enchanting's master." Shen Miao opened her mouth to break the deadlock and smiled gently. "We are not here to play today." Jingzhe and Guyu wanted to cover their eyes and could not wait to pretend that they did not know. Hearing the word mistress, Lu Ying was stunned and her eyes vigilantly sized up Shen Miao from head to toe. Shen Miao walked over and Jingzhe and Guyu quickly moved the stool in front of the table closer to Lu Ying and waited for Shen Miao to sit down. "You are the one who let Enchanting come to my shop every day?" Lu Ying asked. Shen Miao nodded. Lu Ying supported her chin with one hand, and her gaze suddenly became flirtatious. "This servant does not understand gentlemen's actions. Could it be that you have fallen in love with me?" Enchanting looked up at the sky. Lu Ying was after all a female in a brothel, and when she did such a brothel, it could be said that she had reached the point of perfection. Jingzhe and Guyu revealed a look of disdain. Shen Miao looked at her. "What does young lady Lu Ying think?" Lu Ying carefully sized up Shen Miao, and her gaze paused for a moment before suddenly smiling. "This young lady wants to play the fake phoenix trick in the play script." She actually saw through Shen Miao's female identity. Shen Miao was not surprised. She was born delicate and pretty, and when she was dressed up as a male, her skin was as white as jade, and her brows were similar. She was excessively delicate when she walked, so when one looked seriously, naturally it would not escape the eyes of others. "I want to redeem your freedom," Shen Miao said. Lu Ying could not laugh anymore. She had been sold to Bao Xianglu for quite some time, and now naturally it could not be compared to that time when she was extremely popular. There were fewer and fewer people asking about her, not to mention spending a large sum of money to redeem her freedom. Lu Ying does not understand young lady's meaning. "I was fortunate enough to obtain a handkerchief, and it was a rare double-sided embroidery. There were only a few dozen people in the entire country who knew how to do double-sided embroidery." Shen Miao said. After many inquiries, one came to know that it was done by young lady Lu Ying. "You?" Lu Ying's hands tightened. "How did you know that it was done by me?" Shen Miao waved her hands. "It is not important how I know. The important thing is that I have an embroidery workshop and lack an embroidery lady. Does young lady Lu Ying have the interest to manage the embroidery workshop for me?" Lu Ying looked at her incredulously and suddenly laughed like a flower. "Young lady, could it be that you want me to turn over a new leaf?" Jingzhe and Guyu were somewhat dissatisfied with Lu Ying's attitude at this moment, and Enchanting also slightly frowned. How many prostitutes longed to wash themselves clean, and Lu Ying was still young. If she washed herself clean, she might have a good future. "I was sold to this place from the start." Lu Ying's face was frivolous. "What I learned is bedroom skills, and only know how to serve and please a male. Young lady, let me manage the embroidery workshop and sell hard labor. I am not able to live through that kind of bitter days. Not afraid that I will collapse the embroidery workshop?" Shen Miao stared at her and smiled gently. "Whether it collapses or not is my matter, but whether to do it or not is your matter." She played it down. "It is just that. This matter is dispensable to me, but to you, it is the only way to leave this place. There are thousands of people in the world and tens of thousands of industries. Everyone has their own way of living. To me, One do not feel that a female in a brothel is lower than others, but the world's view is so. Shen Miao said, just like my garde-mo. She is also a slave, but no one would look down on her. My personal maids, some people would even envy them. The world is like this, and people are divided into 3, 6, and 9 ranks. Who would not want to be a person above others, and who would want to be ridiculed by others every day. Chapter 366. There are thousands of people in the world, thousands of industries, and everyone has their own way of living. To me, I don't think that the women in the brothel are lower than others, but that's how the world sees it. Shen Miao said, just like my garde-mo, he is also a slave, but no one would look down on him. My personal maids, some people would even envy them. The world is like this, and people are divided into different ranks. Who doesn't want to be above others? Who wants to be ridiculed by others every day? You. What Luing hated the most was that people would talk about her background, and when she heard that, she was even angrier. Shen Miao said, you might as well consider it. Since young lady looks down on people who have fallen into prostitution, why is there a need to say such words to me? Luing was not angry but laughed instead. I look down on people who are willing to be reduced to prostitution. Shen Miao stood up and said, after a few days, garde-mo will come over again. Young lady Lu Ying need not be anxious to answer me. But using one's looks to please others will never end well. Shen Miao gave Mo Qing a look, and Mo Qing quickly took out an ingot of silver and placed it on the table. Lu Ying swept a glance at him, and there was some anger on her face. Mo Qing was also very embarrassed. Shen Miao did not intend to stay long and nodded her head to Lu Ying before getting up to leave. One did not know what Lu Ying looked like behind him. When they were out of Bao Xianglu's doors, Jingzhe then said indignantly, Gu, young master had good intentions to redeem her, but did not think that she would not appreciate it. My good intentions are not rewarded. Mo Qing wanted to say something but finally endured it. Gu Yu asked, young lady, are we going back now? Shen Miao did not answer, and her body did not move. Gu Yu found it somewhat strange, and saw that Shen Miao seemed to be looking at something. Following her gaze, she saw that the place she was looking at was the opposite corner of the street, and there was a green-clad person standing there, looking at the little building of Bao Xianglu. Before Gu Yu was able to speak, she saw Shen Miao lifting her feet and walking over. Under the eaves, the green-robed man stood straight, his eyes staring in the direction of the Lu Ying small building. He was so engrossed that he did not even know when someone had come to his side. A light cough interrupted his train of thought. He saw 4 people standing in front of him. The young man in the lead was dressed in a moon-white robe. He had delicate features and looked like he was carved out of jade. Who knew which family he was from? At this moment, she looked at him with a faint smile on her lips. Pei Lang was stunned. He felt that this young man looked familiar. The young man nodded at him. Mr. Pei. Shen Miao. Pei Lang's eyes widened slightly. He looked at the attendants and guards behind Shen Miao and looked at Shen Miao again. Most likely he was somewhat shocked and said, why are you dressed like this? It was not rare for a female to dress up as a male. In Mingqi, many young ladies would occasionally dress up as a male for convenience, and when they dress up, they would have a different kind of beauty. But Shen Miao? Pei Lang looked at the handsome youth in front of him and did not know what to say for a moment. I just came out from Bao Xianglu, Shen Miao said. Pei Lang coughed all of a sudden, and his face turned red. It was not uncommon for a woman to dress up as a man, but this was the first time he had heard of a woman dressed up as a man visiting a brothel. But Shen Miao still had a very magnanimous look, without a trace of shyness. Shen Miao suddenly took a step forward and moved closer to Pei Lang. With a pop sound, she opened the fan in her hands and covered both of their faces. She softly said at the other end of the fan, everyone said that the young ladies of Bao Xianglu are the most beautiful in the world, so I specially went for a stroll. Recently, there are many new Persian dancers, and each of them are incomparably fragrant. Even if Pei Lang was calm and composed outside, and was able to deal with high officials and noble people with ease, but facing Shin Miao's slightly ambiguous actions, he was somewhat at a loss. Not to mention that Shin Miao was talking about all these messy things. It made him suddenly have an illusion, as if the person in front of him was really that noble gentleman who walked on horseback and slept with flowers and willows, and was discussing with him which family's dancers were more beautiful. Chapter 367. Nonsense. Remembering his identity as a teacher, Pei Lang squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. Shin Miao gently smiled, and her eyes curved like a crescent moon, almost like an orchid. She said, "But I have ordered young Lady Lu Ying's card." As soon as these words came out, Pei Lang's body stiffened. Shin Miao kept her folding fan and looked at him with a smile. "I see that gentleman Pei has been looking at Lu Ying's little building for a long time. Is it that you are also yearning for young Lady Lu Ying?" Pei Lang stared at Shin Miao, and his calm expression suddenly turned fierce. Shin Miao remained unmoved and continued to smile happily as she pointed to Kuai Huolu. "Since Mr. Pei is also interested in young Lady Lu Ying, why not go in with me for a cup of wine and chat about beauties?" Her actions were obviously frivolous, but there was a kind of irresistible majesty about her. She folded her fan horizontally in front of her chest and went upstairs on her own. She left a sentence from afar. "Good wine and chatting with beautiful women is the happiest thing in the world." Even though Jing Zhe, Gu Yu, and Mo Qing trio did not understand the meaning of Shin Miao's words, they had never refuted Shin Miao's decisions and immediately followed in. Pei Lang stood there alone. After a moment of hesitation, he made up his mind and followed her in. At the window seat upstairs, Ji Yushu suddenly jumped up. "Look, I already said that Shin young lady admires that Pei Lang and went in such a big circle to pick young Lady Lu Ying's name. It was all so that she could speak with Pei Lang today." Gao Yang ignored him and secretly guessed. Just now she used the fan to cover her face. What did she say to Pei Lang? Gao Yang shook his head. She used the fan to cover it. Could it be that she knows that you can read lips? When he said that, Gao Yang looked at Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he did not agree or disagree. Speaking of which, just now the action of Shin young lady waving the fan was so elegant that it was even more outstanding than me. Ji Yushu sighed. How could such a beautiful person fancy a poor scholar? Even if you follow me, it's still better than that pretty boy who can't even afford to visit a brothel. Xie Jingxing stood up and Ji Yushu asked, "Where are you going?" "Of course it's to listen to what they have to say." Xie Jingxing smiled meaningfully. "I want to see what kind of chess piece Pei Lang is." In the elegant room of Kuai Huolu, Mo Qing stood by the door while Jing Zhe and Gu Yu stood on both sides with their heads lowered, as if they did not exist. At the table, Shin Miao was pouring wine. The wine was Lu wine. Its color was like amber, and it smelled fragrant. This wine wasn't intoxicating. As long as one's alcohol tolerance wasn't too bad, drinking a little would be fine. Shin Miao poured 2 cups and her posture when pouring the wine was very elegant. Her fingers grabbed the handle of the wine pot, and when the crystal-clear wine was poured into the small jade cup, the sound was very pleasing to the ear. Pei Lang watched helplessly as Shin Miao pushed a cup of wine in front of him and said with a smile, "Gentlemen, please drink."
Shin Miao.
Pei Lang directly called her by her name, and his expression had not eased since he entered. He said, "What exactly do you want to do? Mr. Pei is actually so anxious to talk about beauties without wine. Isn't it like a cow chewing peonies?" Shin Miao looked at him calmly. Pei Lang was dumbfounded by her words. He had stayed in Guangwentang for several years, and the people that he met were all respectful to him. Even the most mischievous student would not speak to him in such a frivolous tone. If it was other people, it would be all right, but it was Shin Miao. Pei Lang always felt that Shin Miao was not a frivolous person, and speaking like this made him unable to figure out the other party's background. Seeing that Pei Lang did not speak for a long time, Shin Miao gently laughed. She said, "Just joking with Mr. Pei. Why is Mr. Pei so nervous?" Chapter 368. When she said those words, her eyes were clear, but there seemed to be some mischievousness. It was clearly the appearance of an innocent young female, but in a moment there was a kind of unknowingly charming charm. Pei Lang's gaze slightly paused. This wine is Lu wine. Shen Miao picked up the wine cup and raised it towards Pei Lang. Pei Lang's expression suddenly changed, but Shen Miao did not seem to notice his expression and said slowly, "The wine brewed in the Luqi region is also amber in color. The Lu wine in Kuai Hua Lu must have been transported over from the Luqi region." Pei Lang looked at her and suddenly picked up the wine cup on the table and drank the wine in one gulp. "This wine is not intoxicating," Shen Miao said with a smile. "Otherwise, if others see it, they would think that Teacher Pei is a wine jar." Her tone was coquettish, but her words made Pei Lang's palms slightly moist. She said, "Speaking of which, the people of Lu are good at drinking wine and drink from jars." Just now Teacher Pei's manner was somewhat like a Lu person. Pei Lang pursed his lips and did not speak, but his gentle eyes were somewhat distorted. Shen Miao supported her cheek with one hand, and her face was slightly flushed from the wine. Even if she was not intoxicated, there was a faint blush on her face, and when she squinted her eyes, she looked like a crabapple sleeping in spring. But because she was dressed as a male, it was refreshing and pretty, and there was a different kind of charm. She said, "I remember that 10 years ago, there was a prefectural magistrate of Lu who also seemed to have the surname Pei. If one did not know, one would think that Teacher Pei and that person were from the same family." Pei Lang suddenly placed the wine cup on the table, and at the same time, Mo Qing glared and his right hand pressed on the sword at his waist. Unfortunately, that prefectural magistrate Pei's residence was involved in an old matter of the previous dynasty, and his entire family was beheaded by His Majesty. In the entire residence, the males were all executed, and the daughters were exiled to be prostitutes for officials. Shen Miao could not stop laughing. One heard that prefectural magistrate Pei's residence had a pair of outstanding children, and they were still young but died in this storm. Pei Lang's lips were slightly trembling as he asked word by word, "Who exactly are you?" "Shu." Shen Miao gestured for her to keep quiet and drank another cup of wine. Her snow-white face flushed red as she said, "Actually, I was fortunate to hear of a secret. Seeing that Gentleman Pei is also surnamed Pei, there is no harm in sharing it with Gentleman Pei." That prefectural magistrate Pei's residence had the ability to send a pair of children to escape and avoid disaster. Unfortunately, the officials were hot on their heels, so they could only protect one person. Hence, prefectural magistrate Pei managed to protect a son, but his daughter was captured by the officials. She regretfully shook her head. The government officials are like wolves and tigers. They never show mercy to the families of sinners. That little girl was caught. How could she have a good ending? Shen Miao sighed. If I were to say that prefectural magistrate Pei knew that his daughter would fall into the tiger's mouth and her life would be worse than death, but he still pushed his daughter out. It is somewhat heartless. Pei Lang closed his eyes, a pained expression on his face. "Mr. Pei, you must be feeling the same way." Shen Miao smiled as she looked at him, but one would think that this has nothing to do with Mr. Pei, because Mr. Pei is not from Lu. Mr. Pei is a merchant that was born in the Ding capital. Speaking of these, it is only because this Lu wine is intoxicating and one was momentarily sentimental. The gentleness on Pei Lang's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced with a strong vigilance and precaution. He said, "This is General Shen's intention?" Shen Miao shook her head. "My father dotes on me and gave me an embroidery workshop. The embroidery workshop is lacking an embroidery lady." Shen Miao dragged her voice. One heard that more than 10 years ago, prefectural magistrate Pei's eldest daughter knew double-sided embroidery since young. Coincidentally, this Bao Xiang Lu's young lady Lu Ying also knew double-sided embroidery. I thought that since both of them were reduced to prostitution and knew double-sided embroidery, perhaps young lady Lu Ying and that sinner's young lady had some relation. As for me, I had some compassion and saved her from prostitution. Shen Miao looked at Pei Lang and said, "Mr. Pei, do you think that this student did the right thing?" Chapter 369. She referred to herself as a student. Her black hair was wrapped in a man's official hat. Her smiling appearance made her look like a handsome young man. But in those clear eyes, there were deep secrets and intentions that no one could see through or guess at. She pretended to be charming and quick-witted, but she vividly displayed the hidden daggers behind the smiles of the officials in the official world. Dealing with her was like walking on a tightrope at the edge of a cliff. There were hidden meanings in her words, and it was hard to tell whether she was a friend or foe. Pei Lang tilted his head. "What do you think?" Shen Miao smiled. Her smile was pure, as if she was really happy that she had done a good deed. She said, "I think it's very good. Even if that prefectural magistrate Pei's son found out about Elder Sister's whereabouts and personally came to redeem Elder Sister's freedom, based on Miss Pei's resentment towards prefectural magistrate Pei and her own temperament, she would not be willing. Instead, you'll ruin your life." Pei Lang did not speak. Some people in the world are originally jade, but after being mixed in a pile of rocks for a long time, they become rocks. But there were some people who hid their arrogance in their bones. Even if they were ground to dust, the arrogance in their bones would not be shaken. It was said that although prefectural magistrate Pei had committed a crime, he was an arrogant person. Presumably, the son and daughter that he taught would not be inferior to him. "You say," Shen Miao looked at Pei Lang, "would that young lady rather live with the identity of a noble lady who has fallen into prostitution or live with the identity of a prostitute who has washed herself clean?" After saying so much, Pei Lang sneered. "What do you want me to do? Mr. Pei, you're smart. I knew I couldn't hide it from you. One little clue reveals the general trend, and one can understand the meaning of a song. That's what they say." Shen Miao was not stingy with her compliments to Pei Lang before saying, "Gentleman Pei is a talented person and has knowledge at his chest. Why not enter officialdom?" "Shen Miao!" Pei Lang suddenly shouted. He did not know that Shen Miao's words had poked his sore spot as he suddenly became agitated, and even Jing Zhe and Guyi looked at him. Pei Lang said furiously, "Don't even think about it. Gentleman Pei need not be anxious, and might as well listen to me calmly." Shen Miao smiled. Perhaps Gentleman Pei was frightened by my story just now. Feeling that in the officialdom, if one is not careful, one would implicate the entire residence and it would be dangerous and full of misfortune. Moreover, after entering officialdom, one would not be as comfortable as being a carefree gentleman. Pei Lang's expression gradually recovered, as if he had returned to that he was a gentleman.
"But you are all alone now."
"You don't have a lover or a family, so you don't have to worry about being implicated. Furthermore, in this world, those who stand high can see far. Those who stand high can also do more." If he wanted to protect the people he wanted to protect, it was not enough to just rely on a teacher. Even though teacher is able to have students all over the world, but Shen Miao calmly and leisurely raised her cup. It was obvious that she was smiling, but in a moment there was an indifferent coolness. She said, "When something really happens, the noble families would avoid it like the plague. So how would they do their best? It is to be the right as it is to be as to be strong. By one, as one's strength as one can."
As.
Who taught you to say these words, and what is the purpose? What benefits is there for him if I enter officialdom? Shen Miao gently smiled. Pei Lang, this person looked gentle and indifferent and was indeed a gentleman who did not care about external things and wholeheartedly devoted himself to teaching. Chapter 370. How did I profit? Pei Lang said lightly. Teacher did not profit, but young Lady Luing did. Shen Miao smiled as she looked at him, and her bright eyes flashed. A female turning good and having a steady reliance for the rest of her life is equivalent to saving another's life. Pei Lang stared at Shen Miao. If at this time he still did not understand Shen Miao's intention, then he would be a real fool. After entering officialdom, what do I need to do? Pei Lang asked. Shen Miao looked at him with satisfaction. It was Pei Lang's usual style to weigh the pros and cons in the shortest time and make the most advantageous choice. But her mind could not help but think of the time when Fu Xiuyi deposed the crown prince. She also knelt down and begged Pei Lang. Pei Lang's tone of discussion was as rational and ruthless as now. Now the chips were in her hands, and this once high and mighty imperial tutor could only be manipulated by her. Shun Miao's heart floated with a trace of shallow comfort. This comfort was shown on her face and became joy. Actually, it is nothing much. Shun Miao said, "Teacher is overflowing with talent, and even if one does not take the initiative to enter officialdom, 1 year later there would naturally be noble people who would solicit you. One only hoped that at that time teacher would not reject the noble person and think of ways to agree to it. Of course, on the surface one would agree, but one must be used by me." "Do you want me to be an insider?" Pei Lang looked at Shun Miao incredulously. Shun Miao shook her head. "How can it be considered as an insider? Teacher can be promoted and get rich. I guarantee that teacher's identity will not be exposed and only need to tell me some news at certain times." Pei Lang was silent for a moment before looking at Shun Miao. "Who is the noble person that you are talking about?" Shun Miao smiled gently. "Prince Ding, Fu Xiuyi." Pei Lang was startled and involuntarily looked at Shun Miao again. He knew that Shun Miao was in love with Prince Ding in the past to the point that it became a laughingstock in the city, and also knew that Prince Ding, that kind of hidden person, would be dismissive of Shun Miao. Afterwards, one did not know when it started, but Shun Miao seemed to have changed into another person. Pei Lang had always felt that there was someone behind Shun Miao giving pointers, but at this moment thinking about it, he could not help but guess. Could it be that it was because love turned to hate that she even schemed against Prince Ding? But just because love was not reciprocated, one would do such things? Pei Lang was confused. The girl in front of him was pretty in men's clothing. After drinking wine, there was a faint blush on her cheeks. She was in the prime of her youth, and her appearance was fair and lovely. Her eyes were like a newborn cub's, untainted by even a speck of dust. However, in her every movement, there was an inadvertent flirtatiousness. Pei Lang felt a little uncomfortable. To him, talking to a young lady of Shun Miao's age was like an elder talking to a younger generation, or at least like an older brother talking to a younger sister. But at this moment, it seemed that he was the one at a disadvantage. His every move was being led by the nose, and he couldn't even resist. "What do you want?" Pei Lang had asked this question many times, and until now, he was not sure if the person who did these things was someone else or Shun Miao herself. It was as if his trump card had been seen by Shun Miao, but he did not even understand Shun Miao's initial purpose. He was absolutely suppressed. "I don't want to do anything. I just want to make a decision that's good for me and Sir." Shun Miao smiled as she tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, making her neck as white as jade. She said, "Teacher, are you going to agree or not?" "I can only answer here?" Pei Lang asked. "You have..." Shun Miao pointed to the wine pot. "Time for a pot of wine. After drinking this pot of wine, teacher will tell me the answer." "No need." Pei Lang interrupted her words. "If you can do what you promised, I will agree to it." There was a moment of silence in a room. After a moment, Shun Miao smiled. She lifted the wine pot and filled the 2 empty cups with wine before picking up the cup in front of her and made a gesture to toast with Pei Lang. Chapter 371. Pei Lang hesitated for a moment before raising his cup. There was a strange feeling in his heart. To drink with one's own student in a restaurant, his heart was somewhat hot. "I wish Mister's future bright and boundless prospects." Shun Miao smiled as she drank the wine in one gulp. She drank it very quickly, and a trace of wine flowed out from the corner of her mouth, across her slightly pointed chin, and into her white collar. Pei Lang looked away. No matter how beautiful a budding young female was, she was still young and inexperienced. Especially Shun Miao, this kind of gentle and delicate beauty, she was dignified and reserved. Pei Lang was not a person who loved beauty, but for a moment, his mind was in a mess as he felt that this was not right and out of place. A trace of carefreeness flashed in Shen Miao's eyes. Most likely it was because she drank the wine that some hidden emotions in her heart came out like a sin. She remembered that Pei Lang had a dignified and solemn appearance and was most particular about reason. In front of Pei Lang, she vividly interpreted the 4 words motherly model of the world, but at the end she was still defeated by Pei Lang's pros and cons. That was the imperial tutor who could decide Fu Ming's life and death in the previous lifetime, but now she was holding on to his weak spot. In front of Pei Lang, she had the bearing of an empress and could not even cry for Wan Yu. Now, she did not have the dignity of an empress and did not have the virtues of a woman. She dressed up as a male, went to a brothel and drank with a teacher. Her actions were frivolous and unrestrained. What could Pei Lang do? He also could not do anything to her. But that carefreeness was only for a short moment. When Pei Lang agreed, she knew that there was no need to continue pestering him. The flirtatious look that was caused by the wine faded away, and inch by inch, she became sober. She stood up and lifted her chin slightly, returning to that slightly dignified Shen Miao. After young Lady Lu Ying has settled down, one will inform Mr. of the location of the embroidery workshop. Shen Miao nodded her head. The money has already been paid. Mr. Please drink slowly. One cannot often drink the wine of the Lu. One did not know if the last sentence was sarcasm or politeness, but it made Pei Lang's brows slightly wrinkled as he watched Shen Miao leave with a few people. He picked up the wine and drank a mouthful. It should be a mellow wine, but it was surprisingly astringent in his mouth. Walking out of the door, Jing Zhe and Gu Yu did not dare to speak, as both of them could see that Shen Miao was not in a good mood at the moment. Pei Lang's words made them confused in the clouds and sensitively felt that this matter was not a small matter, thus they did not dare to speak easily. When the cold wind blew, the blush on her face dissipated. Shen Miao closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was only coldness in her eyes. As for Pei Lang, she still held a grudge against him for standing idly by the side. No matter how hard she tried to hide it, it still leaked out a little. However, his goal was achieved. Let's go back. She walked towards the carriage. In another hidden room adjacent to Kuai Hualu, the few people in the room were all silent. Just now he had seen a good show. At first he thought it was full of fun, but now that the person had left, the tea had cooled. Thinking about it carefully, he couldn't help but feel astonished. Ji Yushu swallowed his saliva and seemed to want to break this dull atmosphere. It is really good to have a relationship with this building. At least it is more convenient to eavesdrop on the walls. Not only can one listen, one can also see. Haha, very good. At the back of the carved pillar, there was a huge colored glass that was hidden by the thin railing. It was said that it was colored glass that came from the Western Hemisphere. One end could not see this end, but this end could see that end. In addition, there was a copper pillar that was full of small holes, so everything that was said could be heard clearly. But when Ji Yushu finished speaking, the other 2 people in the room did not answer him. Gao Yang used his folding fan to support his chin, which was his usual appearance when he was thinking. Xie Jingxing bent his elbow to support his head as he played with the teacup in his hands while thinking about something. Unable to stand such an atmosphere, Ji Yushu opened his mouth. Both of you, do not remain silent. Isn't it just a matter of Prefectural Magistrate Pei's residence in the Lu province? Pei Lang is Prefectural Magistrate Pei's son. Shen Miao's story was easily told because she believed that Pei Lang could understand, and the 3 people here were not fools, so they understood after thinking about it. The Lu province's senior Prefectural Magistrate Pei had a pair of children. The older sister was Lu Ying, and the younger brother was the current Pei Lang. During the escape, in order to protect Pei Lang, the Pei family arranged people to abandon Lu Ying, and Lu Ying eventually fell into prostitution. And Pei Lang had already arranged a retreat route for the Pei family and turned into a Ding capital person. He lived here since young and was born into a merchant family. His parents passed away a few years ago, and now he was alone. His natural background was not discovered by anyone for many years. However, Xie Jingxing's lips lazily hooked up, so how did she know about the details that Bai Shaoxing was unable to find out? At the end, his voice turned cold, and his peach blossom eyes were filled with murderous intent. Chapter 372. How so? Ji Yushu asked. Gao Yang touched his chin. Since one wants to deal with Prince Ding, it is not just Prince Ding's side. The Crown Prince, Prince Zhou, and Prince Li, which side is Shen Miao's people on? Not on any side, Xie Jingxing said. Ji Yushu felt strange. Why is it not on any side? Xie Jingxing's eyes slightly slowed down. Pei Lang is not an ordinary person but has yet to enter officialdom and is still immature. Just now all of you have heard that Shen Miao's moves, Shen Xian may not be able to use it as neatly as her. Slippery and slippery, not admit, not deny, not decline, and also not accept. The officials who had been in and out of the sea of officials for many years might not be able to do it as smoothly as her. Shen Xian was a military general and Luo Shuiyan was also a military general, so where did Shen Miao learn this? Was there an expert guiding the Shen family? He originally thought so, but now it seemed that it was Shen Miao's own idea. If she was the crown prince or other prince's people, she would not use such a step-by-step planning method. Each prince had their own power behind them, so how would they use such a clumsy method? However, she was able to maximize the goal that she could achieve within the scope of her own ability. One could not help but wonder how big of a storm she would be able to stir if she was given enough background and power. Even if she did not have any chips in her hands now, she could still slowly cultivate chess pieces. The world was like a chess game, and in this chess game of Ming Qi, there were too many people playing. But Xie Jingxing had never placed Shen Miao in it. She was a weak female, and had no motive. But now Xie Jingxing could see her ambition through the young female's ability to win over a hero with a cup of wine. But we still do not know how she knew about Pei Lang's background. Ji Yushu said, even the Feng Xian pawnshop did not manage to find out. Prefectural Magistrate Pei's residents used all their strength to protect this son of his, so they must have made full preparations. Pei Lang indeed did not disappoint his father's expectations. He did not seek revenge, nor did he have any resentment, and concealed his identity to become a teacher. No one would pay attention to him, but Shen Miao saw through his tricks and even used Lu Ying as a bargaining chip to counter Pei Lang. One did not know where she got the news from, just like the Chen brothers previously. Do not care about her, Xie Jingxing said. Is the request for Marshal written? I did. Gao Yang frowned. But are you sure? From the start, there was no turning back. Also, the other side hasn't received any news about your plan yet. If they don't agree, do as I say. Xie Jingxing stood up. Returning to the Shen residence, in the western courtyard, Shen Miao changed her clothes, and just as she took off her hair, she saw Bai Lu rushing in and said, Young lady, Fern asked you to go to the room as there is an important matter to discuss. The end of the year had passed, and it was almost spring. Because Shen Xian requested Emperor Wen Hui to stay in the Ding capital for half a year more, Luo Shuiyan's life was much more relaxed. He would go all out to buy clothes and jewelry for Shen Miao, or let Shen Xiao bring Shen Miao to eat, drink, and play. Sometimes Shen Miao herself felt that she was raised by Shen Xian and wife as a hedonistic son of rich parents. Shen Miao casually tied up her hair and went to Luo Shuiyan's room. Upon entering the house, one was surprised to see that Shen Xian and Shen Xiao were also there. Seeing her enter, Luo Shuiyan quickly pulled her to sit beside her and said, Today, what did Jiao go out for? Shen Miao let Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang stay in the room, and if anyone asked, she would say that she went out for a stroll. She said, casually strolled and passed by Kuai Huolu and brought a few jars of strong wine for father and eldest brother. Worthy of being father's darling. Shen Xian's eyes brightened when he heard that this Ding capital's wine is too sweet and greasy. How can it be considered as wine? It is still the strong wine that is better. Satisfying. Chapter 373. Xinqiu was also happy. Little sister is so thoughtful. All you know is to drink. Luo Shuiyan rolled her eyes at the father and son pair and said, those things can be bought by the servants. Jiao Jiao doesn't need to care about them. You this woman. Shen Xian was unhappy again. It is all Jiao Jiao's kind intentions. How can the servants buy the same as Jiao Jiao? How short-sighted. It was rare for Shen Miao to have such a close relationship with them, and Shen Xian was very happy. Even if Shen Miao brought back 2 jars of water, he would be happy to the heavens, so naturally he would refute Luo Shuiyan's words. Short-sighted? Luo Shuiyan squinted at him. Foreign is happy or angry. Shen Xian immediately said, I am a stinky brat who is short-sighted. Shen Xian slapped Shen Qiu's head. Luo Shuiyan was too lazy to see the father and son putting on a show and looked at Shen Miao. Jiao Jiao. The reason for coming here today is actually because there is a matter to discuss with you. Mother, please speak. You've heard about the separation of the family. Your father and I have also thought it through. We have to buy a new house. There was a house in the east of the city that was not bad. He could buy some maids to clean and serve him. It's just... Luo Shuiyan looked at Shen Miao and was somewhat embarrassed. Previously, when your father and I went to the northwest region, we left you behind and felt that with the protection of the Shen family, you would be more stable. Now that the family has separated, if your father, your big brother, and I leave, you're a girl. It's not safe for you to live alone in a house, and you're also afraid of people talking nonsense. So, Jiao Jiao, are you willing to go to the northwest with me? Shen Miao was slightly startled. Sister, the northwest is so fun. Shen Qiu saw that Shen Miao was in a daze and quickly said, it is not as exaggerated as what they said. Living in the Shaochun city, there are mountains on one side and rivers on the other. There are also many rare birds and beasts. At that time to hunt, one would be able to get a white tiger skin to make a cloak for you. Nonsense. Luo Shuiyan laughed and scolded, your sister is a girl. What does she need the white tiger skin for? Shen Qiu scratched his head. There's also a mine. The gemstones there are huge. Sister can also make jewelry. Shen Miao smiled slightly. She was still somewhat hesitant because there were other things to do in the Ding capital, but after hearing Shen Qiu's words, she had some yearning for the Shaochun city in the northwestern region. Who didn't want to live a carefree life? Who was willing to open their eyes and think about how to scheme against others every day? She sighed in her heart. She would just go along with it. As long as she went this once, she would not have to go next year.
All right.
Under everyone's expectant gaze, Shen Miao nodded her head. I also want to go and experience it. Luo Shuiyan gave a sigh of relief. Shen Xian laughed loudly. I already said that Jiao Jiao would definitely agree. After coming back for so long, when has Jiao Jiao ever despised us martial artists? Younger sister. Shen Qiu was also excited. When the time comes, I will bring you to see my brothers. They all know that I have a younger sister and have never seen you before. You haven't seen your grandfather's family since you were born, so you won't be able to recognize them this time. Luo Shuiyan's paternal family was a military general in the northwestern region, and they only rushed over once, when Shen Miao was born. Afterwards, because they were separated by 1,000 li, they did not see each other in these years. Shen Miao's eyes drooped. In the last lifetime, after Luo Shuiyan's death, the Luo family and the Shen family broke off contact. Shen Miao did not have a deep relationship with the grandfather's family, so she was not clear what kind of ending the Luo family would have. But thinking about it, with Mei Furin's ruthless methods, there would be a way to make Fu Xiu not let off the Luo family. After speaking some more until it was late, Luo Shuiyan then rushed Shen Miao back to her room to rest. After Shen Miao freshened up, she sat in front of the table and looked at the dancing flames and could not help but sigh. If she really wanted to follow Shen Xian to the northwestern region, then she had to settle everything in this half a year. Chapter 374. The only thing worth comforting was the matter of Pei Lang. She had always been very clear that the Shin family was like a big tree that attracted the wind, and it was not good to be involved in the matters of the palace. However, she was just an unmarried daughter and did not have the chance to come into contact with deeper things. Moreover, many things had changed in this life, so he could only let Pei Lang be a spy. Fu Xiuyi's temperament was suspicious, and he would study a lot of things that were sent to his door, so it was inevitable that he would not investigate her. But 1 year later, Fu Xiuyi would take the initiative to recruit Pei Lang, and Pei Lang would push the boat with the current, and it would be much easier. As for subduing Pei Lang, there was still a bit of luck involved. That year when Fu Xiuyi subdued Pei Lang, it was also because one of his subordinates had a friendship with Prefectural Magistrate Pei's residence. Thus, he was able to find out about Pei Lang's background. At that time, it was because Fu Xiuyi had settled down Luing that Pei Lang was ultimately used by him. The Pei siblings were people who were unmoved by force or persuasion. They had their own ideas. For example, Luing, after falling into prostitution, one could no longer see a trace of the daughter of an official's family. She was at ease being a prostitute, and perhaps recalling her original identity made her feel pain. As for Pei Lang, he didn't even think about revenge. He was content as a teacher. Luing was not willing to admit her own identity and was resentful towards the Pei family for abandoning her to protect her younger brother. When Pei Lang came forward, Luing would resist even more intensely. But Shun Miao gave Luing a docile way to live. To be able to control Luing was to be able to control the guilty Pei Lang. After a few years, Pei Lang, who had gone through many trials and tribulations in court, would be more mature, and when he saw Shin Miao's words today, he would feel that it was full of loopholes. However, Pei Lang had yet to become an official. No matter how smart he was, he still lacked experience. Young lady, it is better to rest early. Jingja smiled. Tomorrow one still need to follow Foreign to see the residence at the eastern side of the city. Shun Miao nodded. In this half a year, at least the family would be separated, and he would be able to start a new residence. However, she didn't expect that her plans couldn't keep up with the changes. On the morning of the second day, after Shin Miao had her meal, Luo Shuiyan's maid came over and said that after Shin Miao changed her clothes, she would go to the residence. After all, this was a residence that he would be living in the future. Whether it was comfortable or not, he would have to take a look before deciding. But before Shin Miao could dress up, someone came from the palace. She wanted Luo Shuiyan to make a trip to the palace, and the palace maid also said that if there was no problem, Shin Miao could also be brought along. Although he said so, it was almost like an order. Shun Xian and Shin Qiu's faces immediately darkened, and Luo Shuiyan was also a little confused. Even though she was a noblewoman in the capital, she was usually not in the Ding capital and was not familiar with those furins in the circle of noblewomen. It would be a joke if the one who invited was a lady from the palace. No matter how she thought about it, Luo Shuiyan did not have much of a relationship with the women in the palace. Shun Xian and Shin Qiu thought further. Luo Shuiyan did not have any relationship with the females, but was requested to bring Shin Miao along. The drunkard's intention was not in the wine. Could it be that they had some ideas on Shin Miao? Once it was about Shun Miao, they would be especially nervous. Shun Xian said, "It is better for me to accompany Foreign to the palace." What are you going to do? Luo Shuiyan said, "I didn't invite you here, and you think it's not troublesome enough. I will bring Jiao Jiao along." She hesitated for a moment. With so many people, one would not do anything out of line. Moreover, I am not a female without the strength to truss a chicken. She wanted to say that if there was anything wrong, one would not necessarily be at a disadvantage if one were to fight. Shin Xian nodded his head. One think that the current situation is not that tense. You can rest assured and go. Luo Shuiyan pulled Shin Miao's hand and boarded the horse carriage that the palace arranged. She originally planned to go to the residence early in the morning, but because of this matter, no one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 375. Shin Xiao and Shin Xian were at the residence's doors, and seeing the horse carriage leaving, they asked uneasily, "Father, mother, and younger sister will be fine, right? I will make a trip to the Ministry of War." Shin Xian turned around. "You stay in the residence. If anything happens, you will be able to provide support." Shin Xiao nodded. In the carriage, Shen Miao's little face was taut, but there were all kinds of guesses in her heart. She didn't feel that she was in any danger. She didn't have anything on her that was worth scheming against. Moreover, she knew better than anyone about the ways of the ladies in the palace. Even if they had a strategy, it wouldn't be so brazen today. The imperial family cared about their reputation the most. If something happened to her in the palace today, the imperial family would be the first to be blamed. If it was the other way around. Shen Miao's gaze was heavy. The females in the palace did not have any relationship with Luo Shuiyan, but they summoned Luo Shuiyan to the palace to speak. Perhaps they wanted to inquire about something from Luo Shuiyan. The drunkard's intention was not wine, but what was it? The Shen family? Or was it Shin Xian? But why would she suddenly pay attention to Shin Xian? Shin Xian had been keeping a low profile in the capital these days, and did not have any connection with Fu Xiao like in the last lifetime. Even if the imperial family wanted to suppress the Shen family, they would have to have a good reason to do so. Could it be that there was already a reason for that? Shen Miao was a little confused. Wanting Luo Shuiyan to bring her into the palace should be a warning. If anything were to happen, Shen Miao, her daughter, would not be able to protect her. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. Shen Miao could not help but feel a little nervous. There were many things in this lifetime that were different from the previous lifetime, especially the big picture of Ming Qi. She tried her best to avoid and delay the tragedy of the Shin family, but it was inevitable that fate would go wrong. What was it this time? Luo Shuiyan saw that Shin Miao's expression was not good and thought that Shin Miao was afraid and said with heartache, "Jiao Jiao, do not be afraid. It is only entering the palace to talk to the ladyships. It'll be over soon. We'll come back to look at the house then." Shen Miao smiled faintly, but was still somewhat absent-minded. When they reached the entrance of the palace, there was already a palace maid who was there to receive them. When she saw both of them, she led them in. On the way, Luo Shuiyan asked the palace maid who looked like a female official which consort had invited them. The female official smiled but did not answer, only saying that she would know when she arrived. At this time, in the palace's Radiance Hall, two beautiful women were laughing and chatting in the hall. The woman on the left had her hair combed into a fairy bun and wore a red palace dress embroidered with gold. She was gorgeous, and although she was smiling as she spoke, her eyes were somewhat absent-minded. She was extremely disrespectful to the woman beside her. Although she acted like this, the woman beside her did not get angry. Instead, she replied with a smile. This woman wore an apricot-colored dress with plum blossoms on it. Her appearance was not as outstanding as the woman on the left, but she appeared gentle and polite, and also elegant. These two people were not others but the palace consorts that invited Shen Miao and her daughter to the palace today. The one on the left was Consort Su Xian, and the elegant one on the right was Consort Dong Shu. It is fine that His Majesty wants us to invite Shin for an over, but why also bring the young lady of the Shin family? Consort Su Xian was somewhat impatient, going for a long time and not coming back. It is really such a big face. The general residence is not a short distance from the palace. Consort Dong Shu smiled. "Jia Jia, do not be anxious." Consort Su Xianfei laughed. "Mimi, you are used to being a good person." She suddenly thought of something and smiled mischievously. Speaking of which, that young lady of the Shin family had once admired His Ninth Highness. Could it be that you are very satisfied with her? That's why you protect her like this? Consort Dong Shu's expression slightly stagnated before she smiled. "Jia Jia really know how to joke. It is just that, since His Majesty wants both of us to come over, it is better to do proper business. That fifth Shin young lady is only following her mother, and in a while the palace maids will bring her out." Chapter 376. Bringing out Emperor when Hui's name, the domineering consort Su Xian could not say anything. Just as she was about to say a few sarcastic words, she suddenly saw her own female official coming in. Consort Su Xian asked, "Arrived?" The female official nodded her head, and in a short while, Luo Shuiyan and Xin Miao walked in. After greeting the two females, Xin Miao followed Luo Shuiyan and stood at the side with her head lowered, not lifting it up. One could only hear a slightly sharp voice, "Xin Foreign, this must be your daughter. Lift up your head and let Ben Gong take a look." Xin Miao paused for a moment and slowly lifted her head up to meet the two females' sizing gaze. When she saw clearly who the person sitting on the right was, her heart could not help but tighten and felt that the blood in her entire body was boiling. Consort Su Xian on the left was Prince Zhou and Prince Jing's consort mother, and Consort Dong Shu on the right was Fu Xiuyi's birth mother. At this moment Consort Dong Shu looked over with a smile and said to Consort Su Xian, "Really a neat child. Clean and tidy, one can see that one has good fortune." Good fortune? Xin Miao only felt flustered in her heart. Consort Dong Shu looked at her with a gentle face, and if one did not know, one would definitely put down the vigilance in one's heart because of her kind attitude. Consort Dong Shu was not favored as there were countless females around Emperor Wen Hui. There were those with background, talents, beauty, and character. Consort Dong Shu, however, was gentle and slow, did not fight for anything, and did not snatch anything. Just based on the word stable, she was able to sit in the position of the four consorts. On the surface, she was the one with the lowest status among the four consorts, but Xin Miao knew that Consort Dong Shu was not a harmless female like her appearance. In the beginning, when Xin Miao married Fu Xiuyi, Consort Dong Shu also praised that good fortune brings prosperity to the husband, but afterwards Fu Xiuyi's wings gradually grew, and Consort Dong Shu treated her lukewarmly. When she returned from the Qin country, Consort Dong Shu, who was the Empress Dowager, was on the same side as Mei Foreign. In Consort Dong Shu's eyes, she was also a chess piece that was used to rope in the Shen family and was a vulgar chess piece that could not be seen in public. Later, when Fu Xiuyi abolished the crown prince, Consort Dong Shu was the first to step forward to help Fu Xing up. She quickly lowered her head to hide the trace of hatred in her eyes. Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu, however, thought that Xin Miao was shy, and Consort Su Xian casually asked, "How old are you this year?" Replying to your ladyship, Xin Miao softly said, "This official's daughter is 14. 14? Consort Su Xian pondered for a while and smiled. "You will be married soon." This senseless sentence made Luo Shuiyan nervous, as she was most worried about Xin Miao. And a female's marriage was more important to one's entire life. If Xin Miao's marriage was controlled by the people in the palace, Luo Shuiyan's expression was not good. Seeing Luo Shuiyan being so affectionate, Consort Su Xian laughed instead and said, "Xin Foreign is so nervous."
Why?
"Are you afraid that Ben Gong will be a matchmaker for young Lady Xin?" Luo Shuiyan hurriedly said, "I dare not." "Do not worry," Consort Su Xian said. "Even if Ben Gong really wants to be a matchmaker, Ben Gong will not randomly choose a couple. I will definitely ask young lady's opinion." Speaking of which, Su Xianfei looked at Xin Miao and smiled maliciously. "Xin young lady, do you have anyone in mind now?" To ask Consort Dong Shu if Xin Miao had anyone in mind in front of her, everyone knew that Xin Miao was once in love with Fu Xiuyi. This was to embarrass Consort Dong Shu in public. Consort Su Xian had always relied on Emperor Wen Hui's favor to be arrogant and despotic. Among the four consorts, Consort Dong Shu was the easiest to bully, so to be able to use Consort Dong Shu as a raft, Consort Su Xian was never tired of it. "Many thanks to your ladyship's good intentions. This official's daughter does not have anyone in mind now," Xin Miao said as she hung her head. Consort Su Xian seemed to be somewhat bored and felt that Xin Miao had a wooden temperament and was not like the idiot in the rumors, otherwise she could make fun of it. She waved her hands. "Never mind. If there is none, then there is none." Chapter 377. Luo Shuiyan became more cautious. As long as it was related to Shun Miao, she would have to raise 120% of her attention to deal with it. Just as she was thinking, she heard Consort Dong Shu laughing from above, for a need not be nervous. Today us two sisters invite you into the palace. In fact, it is to talk about daily life with foreign. After a pause, she then continued. Us two sisters have never been to the northwestern region before, and it is a story that foreign followed the general into battle. We are very curious about the northern region and came to invite foreign for a chat. Consort Dong Shu's voice was gentle and intimate, like the spring breeze that soothed one's heart. Luo Shuiyan did not relax, and instead Shin Miao became more suspicious. She obviously knew that there would be other intentions in entering the palace today, and perhaps it was Emperor Wen Hui who was here to inquire about something. Emperor Wen Hui deliberately looked for Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu. Both of them, one was domineering and the other was gentle. With one hard and one soft working together, it was easy to make one confused and involuntarily speak. Shin Miao's heart was somewhat nervous. Many thanks to your ladyship's appreciation. Luo Shuiyan also smiled. It is just that the northern region is boring, and one fear that your ladyship will not like it. No harm. Consort Dong Shu smiled. Since we invited you over, one would not be afraid of boredom. Her voice paused as she suddenly thought of something and looked at Shin Miao. Fu Xiaoyi knew that the emperor wanted them to sound out Luo Shuiyan, and also knew that Luo Shuiyan would bring Shin Miao along as a warning. Yesterday he had instructed her that if Shin Miao was present, Shin Miao must be sent away during the discussion. Fu Xiaoyi was Consort Dong Shu's son, so naturally Consort Dong Shu would not doubt, but no matter what, she could not see what was worth guarding against this slightly wooden and timid young lady. Shin Miao's head hung down, and one could not see her expression clearly. One only heard Consort Dong Shu saying, but it would be boring for a young lady to hear such interesting things. Tong Yao, bring fifth Shin young lady to stroll around the garden, and when she is tired, bring her to the living quarters to have some snacks and take good care of her. Even though Consort Su Xian was somewhat surprised, she thought that it was Emperor Wen Hui's idea, and it did not affect her so naturally, she did not refute. Luo Shuiyan's heart was uneasy, and it was best to place Shin Miao in front of her, but in the current situation, she also realized that the following conversation with the two consorts would not really be idle. At least, in broad daylight, these people did not dare to let anything happen to Shin Miao. Thinking like this, her heart was slightly at ease, and she smiled at Shin Miao. Jiao Jiao, follow the female official to stroll around the garden. Mother will come and look for you after speaking to the ladyships. Shin Miao did not refuse, but her heart cried out that it was not good. Why did he send her away, without any rhyme or reason? She could act coquettishly and refuse to leave, but that would be too deliberate. Why didn't they let others hear their conversation? Could it be that she had already aroused suspicion? The person who spoke was Consort Dong Shu. It was the first time Consort Dong Shu met her. Could it be that Fu Xiaoyi was reminding Consort Dong Shu? This thought flashed through Shin Miao's mind. But she didn't say anything. She stood up respectfully and said goodbye to concubines Su Xian and followed Tong Yao out. Official Tong Yao led her to the garden. Gardens could be seen everywhere in the imperial palace. They were probably built for the imperial concubines, and they were quite beautiful. It was just that Shin Miao did not have the mood to appreciate it. She was more familiar with every inch of land here than anyone else, and knew clearly which part of the garden was what kind of flowers grew. So, how would she have any interest to listen? Official Tong Yao also saw that she was absent-minded and said, if young lady Shun is tired, this servant will bring you to the living quarters to sit. There are snacks there. Shin Miao nodded her head. Just as they walked halfway and saw the doors to the living quarters, a little eunuch ran over and said a few words to Tong Yao's ear in a hurry. Tong Yao then said apologetically to Shin Miao, the living quarters is the house in front. Young lady Shin should go in first. This servant will come over after sending the things over. Shin Miao nodded her head and did not haggle over it. That living quarters was right in front, and there were guards everywhere in the palace, so there was no fear of anything happening. She herself had come here before and was very clear about it. Walking to the front of the living quarters, she opened the door and walked in. That door closed by itself with its paw sound. Shin Miao's heart quivered, and before she could react, a pair of hands covered her mouth from behind. Shin Miao did not even think as she bit down and bent her elbow to fiercely hit her back. She only heard a sigh sound behind her as she sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Her elbow was grabbed by someone, and she was unable to move. A familiar voice sounded with some suppressed anger. "Shin Miao, are you a shrew?" Shin Miao was slightly surprised, and the person behind her had already released his hand. She turned her head and looked at the other person. Opposite, Xie Jingxing was touching his own hand, and there was a slight anger in his expression. But what Shin Miao cared about was not this. It was different from his previous cynical and unruly romantic appearance. Today he was wearing a dark red official robe with fine cufflinks, long hat, and green boots. His sharp and arrogant appearance was a completely different person from before. Shin Miao had never seen him like this before and was stunned for a moment. Xie Jingxing locked the door and turned his head to look at her with his arms crossed, with an appearance of wanting to settle accounts. But Shin Miao was not afraid of him and only frowned. "What are you doing here?" Coming out from the palace, one thought that it might be you and came over to take a look. "It really is." Xie Jingxing said it in an incomparably relaxed manner. "The emperor summoned your father to the palace." Shin Miao's heart jumped. "What do you mean?" Chapter 378. What do you mean?
Shin Miao asked.
Xie Jingxing would not say such words for no reason, so there must be some other meaning behind it. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Shin Yuan is Prince Ding's people." Shin Miao's heart was slightly shocked, but she did not speak. Before Shin Yuan's accident, he had a secret discussion with Prince Ding. Xie Jingxing said, "The Shin family is now like fire and water, so other than dealing with your father, what else could it be?" "Impossible." Shin Miao cried out involuntarily. Xie Jingxing's eyes stared at her, as if he wanted to see through Shin Miao, and asked, "Why?" Shin Miao's palms were slightly damp, and there was a moment of confusion in her heart. The Shin family's accident was not in these 2 years, and the imperial family would delay dealing with the Shin family for a period of time because there was currently no justification for it. Shin Yuan worked for Prince Ding, and both of them were extremely dependable people and would not take action if there was no absolute certainty. For example, in the last lifetime, she only knew that the second and third household also contributed, and Shin Yuan would definitely take out the evidence of rebellion at the end. But what time was it now? It was still too early for the imperial family to deal with Shin Xian, so why would Shin Yuan take action at this time? The evidence at this time should not be complete, and Fu Xiaoyi chose to take action now? How did it become like this? Her expression was uncertain, and when she raised her head, she met with Xie Jingxing's thoughtful gaze. Shin Miao's heart quivered. Xie Jingxing was quick-witted, and one feared that he would be able to find out something from her expression. Thinking of this, she covered up her smile. "Shin Yuan is my second older brother. Why would he harm my father?" Hearing this, Xie Jingxing smiled instead. His smile had a deeper meaning. "Shin Miao, do you think I am a fool?" "Since little Xie Marquis told me all these," Shin Miao said seriously, "but how does His Highness Prince Ding want to deal with my father?" Xie Jingxing shook his head. Shin Miao did not hold much hope, and even if Xie Jingxing knew, there was no reason for him to tell her. The Xie family had dabbled in the Mingqi structure, and if one were to carelessly help, one feared that one would get into trouble. Even if she was in Xie Jingxing's position today, she would not even give a reminder. It was just that. Shin Miao sized up Xie Jingxing's official robes and asked in puzzlement, "Why did you enter the palace?" She asked casually, but did not know that her confident look made Xie Jingxing pause for a moment. In just a short moment, Xie Jingxing lazily said, "Enter the palace to request for commander." "Invite a commander?" Shen Miao was surprised for a moment and subconsciously asked, "Invite a commander for whom?" Xie Jingxing only smiled and did not speak. Shen Miao suddenly looked at him. "Ask to be the commander? North border. Xiongnu?" This time, Xie Jingxing was surprised. "How do you know?" The matter of the Xiongnu in the northern borderlands was a secret. Before the edict was issued, Shen Xian might not even know about it, much less Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing had always been curious about where Shen Miao's eyes and ears came from, and since she even knew about the matters in the palace, he was even more surprised. Shen Miao stared blankly at him, but her heart was like a raging storm. In the northern borderlands, the Xiongnu had not retreated, but the terrain of the northern borderlands was complex, and the people of the northern borderlands were ferocious and ferocious. A few years ago, Emperor Wen Hui only fought in small skirmishes and was unwilling to confront them head-on. Afterwards, the Xiongnu became more aggressive, and Emperor Wen Hui sent Xie out for an expedition. The Xie family's army was ferocious, but was completely annihilated on the battlefield. At the end of the same year, Xie corpse was wrapped in horse hide, and the entire country mourned. In the spring of the second year, Xie Jingxing went out for an expedition on behalf of his father and was defeated like a landslide. He received the tragic ending of having his heart pierced by 10,000 arrows, skinned and air-dried before being hung on the city walls. Xie Jingxing died at the age of 22, and now he was only 19. Shen Miao's heart felt suffocated for a moment. It was impossible for the emperor to deal with the Xiongnu at this time, and Xie Jingxing requested to be the commander. Xie should not be aware of the matter at this time, and looking at Xie Jingxing's appearance, he should have obtained the order. Chapter 379. Changed again. Changed again. It was obviously a matter of a few years, but it was advanced. If Xie Jingxing went to war now, would it be the same ending as in the past lifetime? As for the Xie family, Shen Miao wanted to keep them to fight against the imperial power in the future, but no matter how much she changed, would some people's fate still follow the old track? Was this arrogant young man with red lips, white teeth, and beautiful, romantic features finally going to take the worst step? Xie Jingxing saw that Shen Miao's expression was strange and did not find it strange. His eyes slightly flashed and said, "You seem to be very worried?" Shen Miao did not have the mood to analyze such slightly teasing words, as her heart was somewhat confused. She looked at him and said, "You lead the Xie family's army? Pay more attention to the Xie family's army, and also pay more attention to the people around you." Shen Miao said word by word. In the beginning, her words were somewhat dry, but towards the end, her expression gradually became serious. The wind and sand of the northern Jiang is strong, and the armors of the soldiers are heavy. No matter what, do not take off the breastplate. In the previous lifetime, Xie Jingxing's heart was pierced by thousands of arrows, and perhaps it would be better if he wore the breastplate. More importantly, Shen Miao felt that Xie Jingxing's death was too strange. How could a young general with outstanding battle tactics be defeated so miserably? In addition, she gradually understood the situation and knew that the imperial family had attacked the aristocratic families, so it was not possible that there were no imperial family people in the Xie family's army. And the tragedy of the Xie father and son might not be without the addition of a conspiracy. Shen Miao wholeheartedly thought about the overall situation, but did not know that with her and Xie Jingxing's current friendship, it was not to the point of being friends. Thus these words that were full of concern seemed to be somewhat subtle. Xie Jingxing was also surprised by her and suddenly smiled as he approached Shen Miao and slightly bent his head. He was very close to Shen Miao, but his pair of peach blossom eyes were smiling as he teased, "So concerned about me?" Shen Miao was immersed in her own thoughts and did not realize that he was already so close. She was suddenly startled and had not recovered from her own conjecture and was at a loss for a moment. Her eyes were clear, and whenever she was at a loss, it was like a child that made one feel pity for her. Xie Jingxing slightly paused, and a feeling of helplessness grew in his heart. He was originally ruthless, and towards the Shen family, he was only a chess piece in the chess game. He knew that Shen Miao's thoughts were deep and her methods were mysterious. She was definitely not a harmless, unmarried female like she looked on the surface. But sometimes, he felt that she was just a little girl who didn't understand anything. Bullying a little girl made him feel a little embarrassed. This shame was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. Xie Jingxing took a step back and said, "It is not a good thing that the Shen family army's momentum is too strong." Shen Miao answered, "The one who entered the palace today is my mother, and the ones who summoned her were Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu." When she spoke of Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu, her expression was not respectful, as if she was talking about two ordinary people. Xie Jingxing was also used to it. He said, "Retreat." "Retreat?" Shen Miao asked. Xie Jingxing did not speak anymore. In the end, he still gave Shen Miao a hint. If Shen Miao was smart, she would understand his meaning. Shen Miao's eyes hung down and thought for a while before saying, "Many thanks." Xie Jingxing lazily waved his hand. No one knew what he was thinking. Shen Miao asked again, "Summon the marshal. When do we leave?" 10 days later. "So fast." Shen Miao exclaimed.
Why?
Xie Jingxing turned his head to look at her and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Can't bear to part." "Not at all." Shen Miao said expressionlessly, "As such. Then one wished the little marquis to be victorious and return triumphantly." After receiving the reward, Xie Jingxing said without a care, "At that time I will give you a little thing as a good luck." Chapter 380. Just as Shen Miao was about to speak, she saw Xie Jingxing pressing her waist and said, "Someone is coming." He then smiled at Shen Miao. "Farewell, Shen Jiao Jiao." He turned and flew out of the window of the room. This person walked out of the window as though he was walking through his own front door. Shen Miao was still in a daze when the door was pushed open and Tong Yao walked in. Seeing Shen Miao standing in the middle of the room, she asked curiously, "Why is Shen young lady not sitting?" Shen Miao recovered to her senses and smiled before getting up and walking to one side to sit down. But her heart was still thinking about what Xie Jingxing said just now. Xie Jingxing's commander request was to set off 10 days later. 10 days later. Was it not exactly the same as 3 years later? 3 years later would also be at this time. Xie Jingxing would set off, and then the Xie father and son of the Xie family would forever end in the history of Mingqi. The Xie family would be heading towards an inevitable ending like in the previous lifetime. What about the Shen family? What would happen to the Shen family? Xie Jingxing gave her a hint before he left, but that was not the ending that she wanted to see. If one were to retreat like this, one would be able to keep one's life, but it was only to keep one's life. Without the protection of power, peaceful days would become a luxury. The path of the previous lifetime made Shen Miao clearly understand one point. Only by standing in a higher position than the enemy would one be able to truly control one's fate. However, Xie Jingxing's method was more than enough to defend, but not enough to attack. What method should be used to break it? In the next few hours, Shen Miao kept thinking about this problem. The snacks on the table were not touched at all. The tea was not even drunk, and she did not have the mood to look at those books. This made female official Tong Yao look at her frequently. not knowing how a young lady like Shen Miao could sit for an entire afternoon like an old man. Even those slow-tempered imperial concubines in the palace did not have this kind of patience. One did not know how long they waited until a little eunuch came to invite them. Female official Tong Yao then brought Shen Miao out, and Luo Shuiyan was waiting for her at the door. When she saw Shen Miao, she barely squeezed out a smile and pulled Shen Miao out of the palace to return to the residence. Even though Luo Shuiyan tried her best to act as if nothing had happened, what kind of person was Shen Miao? She had long learnt to observe one's words and body language in the inner palace and could see Luo Shuiyan's worries. She said, "Mother, what did they say to you?" Luo Shuiyan smiled. "Nothing much, just some matters of living in the Shaochun city. He probably hasn't been to the northwest before and wants to see for himself." Shen Miao asked, "Is it really like this? But if that's the case, why did he specially call Mother into the palace to talk for so long? Isn't that too strange?" Luo Shuiyan touched Shen Miao's head. "What is strange about this? The imperial concubines in the palace can't move around, so their days are a bit boring. Mother will talk to them about distant matters to relieve their boredom. They will also be a bit happier." Even so, Luo Shuiyan was still somewhat worried. Although she did not participate in court affairs, it did not mean that she was ignorant of the dangers of the court. Today, she dealt with it carefully, but it was precisely because she talked with the two concubines about daily life that she was even more puzzled. There were no fools in the palace. Everyone was smart. But in today's conversation, it did not involve military affairs at all, and did not even mention the Shen family army. Instead, he only talked about the commoners of the Shaochun city, which made Luo Shuiyan puzzled. Those who fought had an intuition for danger. She obviously felt that danger was approaching, but did not know where the problem was. Luo Shuiyan felt somewhat depressed, but she was afraid of scaring Shen Miao and did not intend to talk about these matters with Shen Miao. Shen Miao also did not ask her again. When they returned to the residence, the sky was already nearing evening. Shen Xiao and Shen Xian had been waiting at the residence's doors, and upon seeing both of them return, they were relieved. Chapter 381. After the meal, Luo Shuiyan instructed Shen Miao to rest early before pulling Shen Qiu and Shen Xian back to the room to discuss the matter of entering the palace today. Shen Miao did not follow. She had already heard a lot of things from Luo Shuiyan's mouth, but what she could not understand was what did Shen Yuan give to Fu Xiaoyi. The oil lamp shone brightly in her eyes as Shen Miao sat at the table deep in thought. Jing Zhe and Gu Yu were careful not to disturb her. Outside the window, it started to drizzle. This was the first drizzle since the end of the year, indicating the arrival of spring. Spring was about to arrive, and all living things were revived. It was obviously a new hope, but how could one walk out of the dark willows and bright flowers and the heavy ice and snow? Shen Miao closed her eyes. This night, there were also people in embroidered clothes walking in the night. When Xie Jingxing passed by the courtyard, he coincidentally met Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongchao. When both of them saw him, they immediately stopped and respectfully greeted him. "Eldest brother." Towards these two people, Xie Jingxing had always turned a blind eye to them, and it was the same today. When he lifted his feet and was about to leave, he was stopped by Xie Changchao. Xie Changchao was somewhat pleased with himself. Long time no see, eldest brother. One do not know what eldest brother is busy with. A few days ago there was a hunt, and one wanted to go with eldest brother, but father made us follow to Lu Daren's official banquet. Thus one could only regret not going. These days Xieding had been bringing Xie Chongwu and Xie Changchao to his colleagues' banquets because everyone knew that Xieding wanted to bring his two sons into an official career. Speaking of which, Xie Chongwu and Xie Changchao were Shu sons and their qualifications were not as good as Xie Jingxing's. If it was not for Xie Jingxing being frivolous and unwilling to enter officialdom, everyone knew that it would not be their turn. But because of Princess Yuqing, Xie Jingxing and Xieding were in discord for many years, and the relationship between the father and son was like ice. How could it be repaired? Xie Chongwu was more modest than Xie Changchao, but even so, his eyes could not hide the contentment. He said, "Eldest brother should also follow along. Eldest brother is proficient in both the pen and the sword and would definitely gain the favor of all the Daren. At that time it would be much easier to enter officialdom." Xie Changchao and Xie Chongwu had already understood Xie Jingxing's temperament and knew that Xie Jingxing was naturally arrogant. The more he said so, the more impossible it was for him to enter officialdom. In terms of obtaining Xieding's favor, they were destined to be inferior to Xie Jingxing. In terms of literary and military strategy, and even in terms of appearance, they were far inferior to Xie Jingxing. Now that they finally had a chance to suppress Xie Jingxing, naturally, they could not wait to be cocky. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he looked at them with a smile that was not a smile and suddenly asked, very proud. Xie Changchao and Xie Chongwu were surprised, but Xie Jingxing had already left. The disdain in the corners of his eyes fell into the eyes of the two of them. Looking at Xie Jingxing's fading figure, Xie Changchao said hatefully, "What plaything? Who does he think he is?" Xie Chongwu's expression was sinister. "There will be a day when I will trample him under my feet." When Xie Jingxing returned to the room, there were already two people waiting. One of them was a middle-aged man with a full beard, while the other was a young man with a straight face. The bearded middle-aged man asked, "Master, you really want to?" Xie Jingxing sat down in front of the table and waved his hands. Xie Changchao and Xie Chongwu. The younger one said, "Why not?" At the end of the words, there was a hint of killing intent. "No need. If we take action now, there will be complications." Xie Jingxing interrupted his words. "Without me, Xie Chongwu and Xie Changchao would not do anything to Xieding. As for Madame Fong," he sneered, "keep her." Both of them bowed their heads in agreement. Xie Jingxing took out a booklet from his sleeve. That was the copy of the commander request that was presented today. Chapter 382. In the end, he still had to make this move. The first ray of sunlight shone through the carved window onto the table. Shun Miao sat in front of the table without moving. Jingzhi carried a silver basin in and jumped in shock upon entering. "Why is young lady up so early today?" Shin Miao did not speak as Jingzhe walked over. The oil lamp in front of the table had already burned out, and on Shin Miao's fair face, there was a faint greenish-black under her eyes. Jingzhe was surprised for a moment and exclaimed, "Could it be that young lady did not sleep for the entire night?" Shin Miao shook her head and pressed her forehead tiredly. She sat there for the whole night. Xie Jingxing's hint made her puzzled and confused. She did not know what Shin Yuan gave to Fu Xiu and only knew that it must be bad news for the Shin family. And the word retreat was a move that she did not want the Shin family to make. How should he get out of this predicament? Jingzhe spoke with some heartache. No matter how worried young lady is, one should not torment one's body like this. Master and Madam will be heartbroken if they see this. Young lady, you should eat something first and rest. You don't look well. What if young lady falls down first? Shin Miao also felt that her stomach was rumbling, and after thinking for an entire night, her head was somewhat dizzy, so she said, "Bring some porridge over. I will sleep for a while after eating. Do not mention this matter to others." Jingzhe made an AI sound before turning and jogging out, treating it as going to the kitchen to bring Shin Miao's breakfast. Shin Miao stood up and wanted to use hot water to wash her face. Just as she was washing halfway, she suddenly heard footsteps outside the door, and Jingzhe ran back. So fast. Shin Miao was a little surprised. There was still a distance from the small kitchen to here, and even if Jingzhe ran over, she would still need to wait for a while. "Miss, something bad has happened." Jingzhe was somewhat flustered as she said, "Someone from the palace has arrived. Summon Master, Foreign and eldest young master to the palace immediately." The handkerchief in Shin Miao's hands fell into the basin. She calmed herself down and said, "I'll go take a look." In the courtyard, the eunuch from the palace had received Emperor Wen Hui's orders and was talking to Shin Xian. These people would usually be more polite when they saw the formidable general. But today his attitude was not very clear. Sometimes, the attitude of the master could be seen from the attitude of the messenger. Obviously, this trip to the palace was not a good thing. When Shin Miao came out, not only Shin Xian, Luo Shuiyan and Shin Xiu were in the courtyard, the people from the other households also came out. Even old Shin Foreign brought Shin Yuan Bo out. It was just that looking at this look, old Shin Foreign did not show any concern and instead looked on coldly, as if she was afraid of drawing fire onto herself and avoided it. On the other hand, Shunwan asked the eunuch, "May I ask why His Majesty summoned Big Brother to the palace?" The eunuch looked up at the sky. "I am only acting on His Majesty's orders. I do not know His Majesty's intentions. Darren, quickly follow me into the palace." He urged Shin Xian to leave quickly. When Shin Xiu saw Shin Miao walking over, he was somewhat nervous and quickly pulled Shin Miao's hand. "Younger sister, why did you come over?" Seeing Shin Miao looking over, he quickly comforted her. "Younger sister, do not worry. His Majesty only summoned us to the palace to discuss some military matters and will be back soon. When he returns, eldest brother will bring you to eat tonghulu." He was afraid of scaring Shin Miao but did not know that in Shin Miao's eyes, this look was even more suspicious. To summon Shin Xian, Luo Shuiyan, and Shin Xiu to the palace, even though she was not brought along, upon careful thought, the people brought along were the leading figures of the Shin family's army, so this matter was definitely related to the Shin family's army. Now that it was the Shun family's military power, it was a hot potato, and once it involved military power, one must be careful of everything. Chapter 383. At this time, if Shin Miao continued to show fear, not only would she not be able to help, it would instead burden Luo Shuiyan and the rest. Thus Shin Miao smiled. "Really? Eldest brother must keep to his words." Seeing Shin Miao like this, Shin Xiu then let out a sigh of relief. Shin Xiu knew that Shin Miao was intelligent, but did not want Shin Miao to be involved with the matters of the court. Moreover, in the court matters, it was never a person's worth, as there would be deaths and injuries at every turn and countless people would be involved. So how would it be easy to explain? Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian also comforted Shen Miao. Jiao Jiao, just stay in the residence and do not go anywhere. Wait for father and mother to return, then we will go together to make new clothes for Jiao Jiao for the beginning of spring. Shen Miao also complied. She watched helplessly as the eunuch brought Shen Xian and entourage out of the residence. Chun Roqiu pulled Xinwan's hands and said worriedly, "Why would eldest brother and eldest Sa suddenly enter the palace? Did something happen?" Xinwan shook his head. Shen Gui said, "Eldest brother is already in the limelight and does not know how to conduct himself in court. One fear that if something really happened, there would not be anyone to speak to." These words were somewhat meaningful. Shen Gui's meaning was that if something really happened to Shen Xian, the two brothers Shen Gui and Xinwan would not send charcoal in the snow. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. She only heard Shen Yu timidly saying, "If something happened to eldest Bo, it should be a very big matter. Will it implicate us by bringing them all away?" "How would it implicate you?" Shen Gui smiled. "If it implicates you, the first to bear the brunt should be little five." Shen Gui's words were vicious. After the successive loss of his sons, Shen Gui's career was not smooth. He was originally jealous that Shen Xian's position was higher than his and his prestige was higher than his. Now that he saw Shen Xian's misfortune, naturally he was overjoyed and even hoped that Shen Xian's branch would be wiped out so that there would no longer be any obstacles in front of him. A trace of schadenfreude flashed in Shen Yu's eyes as she looked sympathetically at Shen Miao. "Isn't fifth younger sister very pitiful?" Shen Miao did not get angry but smiled instead and said lightly, "The servants in the palace do not know His Majesty's intention, so it seems that both Shu Shu have already understood His Majesty's intention." She looked at Shen Gui. Since second uncle is able to predict things like a deity, when this matter reaches the ears of His Majesty will appreciate second uncle's ability to understand others. It's rare to see someone like second uncle who can understand others. His Majesty can even be compared to the previous dynasty's official way. As these words came out, Xinwan and Shen Gui's expressions changed slightly. What was the greatest taboo for an emperor? It was for his officials to randomly guess the emperor's intentions. Shen Miao's words were not to say that Shen Gui was very clear about Emperor Wen Hui's thoughts, so what was he planning? She even used official Wei from the previous dynasty to insinuate that official Wei was the emperor's trusted aide. Often, the emperor only needed a glance to know what the emperor wanted to do. When the emperor's position was unstable, he had worked together with official Wei to control many of the opposing ministers. But in the end, when the emperor was in power, he had given official Wei a death warrant. No monarch would like an official who could clearly understand one's thoughts. If one understood too clearly, there would be no reverence, and if there was no reverence, perhaps one day a knife would be placed on one's neck. This was the imperial family, the most suspicious. One sentence could decide a person's life and death. Shen Miao's words made Shen Gui's and Xinwan's expressions change, but they dared not refute it. They were afraid that if these words were to be spread out and heard by Emperor Wen Hui, one did not know how much trouble it would bring to themselves. Both of them were secretly shocked as they did not know where did Shen Miao learn the ability to pin such a big hat onto others with just one sentence. In the past, it was Mei Furen's usual tactic. At this moment, Shen Miao was also forced by Shen Gui's unrestrained mouth and did not really want to fight with them here. The most urgent matter was to think of how to solve this matter. Old Shen Furen had seen enough of the show and was not willing to let her son fall into a disadvantageous position, so she coldly snorted, "Will only bring trouble to the Shen family." She was still thinking about the matter of Shen Xian wanting to separate from the family, but once this matter came out, the matter of the separation would be delayed. Old Shen Furen even thought that if something happened to Shen Xian, they would not be implicated, and it would only be the first household that would be implicated. Would not the first household's assets all belong to her? Thinking of this, her eyes revealed a look of greed. Shin Miao's heart was filled with disgust. This room of people had fully acted out what was called throwing stones at a person who was down. The Shin family was definitely on the list of despicable people in the world. Wan Yinyang pulled Shin Dongling's hand and hid at the back. She dared not say anything in this kind of situation. Even though Run Wanyun was awake, she did not leave Kai Yun Yuan and did not appear today. Shin Dongling said softly, "But what would happen to Eldest Bo? Eldest Bo is not in the Ding capital all year round. Could it be that there would be other rewards because of the previous victory?" Shin Dongling's words were most likely to ease the atmosphere. Shin Yu was somewhat displeased with her words, and old Shin Furan also revealed an unhappy expression, but only Shin Miao was slightly surprised. Not in the Ding capital all year round? Yes, Shin Xian and wife and Shin Xiao had been fighting all year round in the bitter cold northwestern region and had just returned to the Ding capital. It was impossible to use the excuse of being in the Ding capital as an excuse. And yesterday Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu were asking about the days in the Shao Chun city. What was the use of asking about the days in the Shao Chun city for? Shin Miao did not believe that the delicate females in the palace would be interested in the remote northwestern region. There must be a connection. Not in the Ding capital. What kind of crime would it be? Chapter 384. Shin Miao's mind was unsettled and no longer stood here entangled with the Shin family. She did not even turn her head back and quickly walked back to her own room. Outside, Shin Gue and entourage had seen enough of the excitement and wanted to inquire about the matter, thus they dispersed in twos and threes. Shin Yu followed behind Shin Ro Chiao, and there was a trace of joy on her face. Yesterday she heard that it was Consort Dong Shu who saw Shin Miao and Luo Shuiyan. Shin Yu's heart was very uneasy. Consort Dong Shu was after all Prince Ding's consort mother, and if Consort Dong Shu had eyes on her, what would happen if she randomly pulled strings? Fortunately today it seemed that the first household was unlucky. Thinking of this, Shin Yu's footsteps became relaxed. It was Shin Dongling who was being held by Wan Yinyang, who looked at the courtyard thoughtfully before following back. The huge western courtyard became empty in a blink of an eye. Even Chi followed Shin Xian's guards back to the Shin family's army. Emperor Wen Hui suddenly summoned people into the palace, and naturally the Shin family's army was imprisoned. Fortunately, Mo Qing was still around because Mo Qing was not in the Shin family's army yet. In the room, Jingzhe, Guyu, Bai Lu, and Shuangjiang were standing behind Shin Miao. Mo Qing stood by the door with his head hung down, and a trace of solemnity appeared on his face. Even though Shin Dongling said that perhaps Emperor Wen Hui would continue to reward Shin Xian, everyone knew that it was impossible. Shin Miao sat at the table with her brows tightly knitted, which made Mo Qing's heart slightly comforted. He was initially worried that Shin Miao would be at a loss of what to do after hearing the news, but now even though Shin Miao's face was solemn, she was not nervous at all. Shin Miao looked at the notes in front of her. The Shin family was then exterminated by Fu Xiao-yi in one fell swoop. At that time she had tried to stop it, but it was Fu Xiao-yi who, in front of all the civil and military officials, listed out the Shin family's crimes one by one until she was speechless. Even though one knew that it was all fake, but these fake evidence were so conclusive that it made one powerless to refute. That day in the throne room, the scenes of the past were like knives and chisels that were carved into her heart. That denouncing the Shin family was according to the length of time, day by day. Now it was the 69th year of the Ming Qi, and she was reborn in the 68th year of the Ming Qi. In the things that Shin Yuan presented to Fu Xiaoyi, the criminal evidence must be something that happened in the 68th year of the Ming Qi, or before. In the 68th year of Ming Qi, what crimes did the Shin family commit? Shin Miao closed her eyes, and some scenes flashed through her mind. She was wearing the Empress court dress, and the phoenix hairpins on her head could not hide the embarrassment around her. The civil and military officials were agitated, Pei Lang was indifferent, and Fu Xiaoyi angrily threw the booklet at her face. A civil official was reading, "In the 68th year of Ming Qi, the Shen family's officers and soldiers disobeyed the emperor's order and released the bandits, deceiving the monarch. Releasing the bandits without permission was deceiving the emperor." Shen Miao suddenly opened her eyes. She suddenly remembered that in the 68th year of Ming Qi, there was indeed not a small matter that happened. Shun Xian went against the Shi Rong and defeated them, seizing 3 cities. Emperor Wen Hui ordered that everyone in the cities be killed without mercy. To a general, massacring a city was the cruelest achievement. And in the Shi Rong city, other than the soldiers, most of the people were the elderly, the weak, women, and children. These old and weak women and children were like the common people of Ming Qi, safe and sound, and the ones at fault were the Shi Rong soldiers. Shun Xian was not a person who liked to kill, thus in private, he left the lives of those women and children. Other than the Shun family's army, no one else knew about this matter, and the people of the Shun family's army were brought up by Shun Xian, so it was impossible for them to betray Shun Xian. In this, there should be Shun Yuan's credit. Perhaps a long time ago, Shun Yuan had buried a hidden chess piece in the Shun family's army. It was just that after the crown prince was deposed, the entire Shun family's crimes were pursued one by one, and this crime of deceiving the monarch was not that important. However, in the hands of Fu Xiaoyi, who had always been steady, to take it out at this time when the time was not ripe, it could only mean that the current situation made Fu Xiaoyi feel a crisis, and the Shun family had become a variable. In this lifetime, because there was no entanglement between her and Fu Xiaoyi did not stop Emperor Wen Hui to let the Shen family stay for a few more years, and the imperial family finally had their eyes on the Shen family, this fat meat. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.